The antenna array is still pointing east when I hear the first screaming. Not the kind of screaming that means someone dropped something or got a bad piece of news. The kind that goes up and stays up. The kind where your brain registers it before your ears have finished processing, and something old in your chest just says no. I'm 40 feet up the access ladder on Array 7. One hand on a corroded junction box, and the other holding a multimeter that cost more than my first car. The desert spreads out below me in every direction, flat, brown, enormous. The tracking station is a cluster of white buildings and dishes, about 300 meters to the northwest. 2 water towers, a generator shed. The main operations building where I check in every morning and pick up my access badge from Phil at the front desk. Phil isn't the one screaming. I don't think so anyway. I stay on the ladder. This is important. I tell myself I stay because moving would be stupid until I know what's happening, and that's partly true. But mostly I stay because I'm frozen. My feet just stop working, and I grip the rail and watch. 3 people come out of the operations building at a run. Not a jog, not a hurried walk. A dead sprint, the kind where your arms are windmilling and your body is leaning so far forward, you're almost falling. 2 of them I recognize. Jeff Ortega from the signal monitoring team, and a woman from the civilian contractor group whose name I never learned even though she's been on site for 4 months. Bad with names. I know this about myself. The third person I don't recognize at all, and that's when I realize the third person isn't running the same way. The third person is running wrong. I don't have a better word for it than that. Wrong. The motion is wrong. Jerky, too fast, like someone turned up the speed without changing the resolution. And the arms don't swing right. They hang. And the head doesn't track the way a head tracks when you're running. It just sort of lolls in the direction of motion. And it's gaining. Jeff is fast. Jeff plays basketball on weekends. I've seen him. And this thing is gaining on Vav. Jeff goes down about 60 meters from the building. I don't watch what happens after that. I look away. I look at the junction box in front of my face, and I see my hand on the multimeter, and I notice my hand is shaking, and I think, get down. Get down from this ladder right now. I get down. The ground is hot through my boots. It's 11:30 in the morning, early September, Mojave Desert, and the ground holds heat like a living thing. My truck is parked by the maintenance access road about 150 meters south of the tower, which means I have to cross open ground to reach it. I look toward the operations building. The woman from the contractor team is gone. I don't know where, don't know which direction she ran. I can see Jeff on the ground. He's not moving. The thing that chased him is gone. I stand there for 3 full seconds and do a complete 180 scan of everything I can see. Nothing is moving. The desert just sits there the way it always does, huge and bright and completely indifferent. The only sound is the wind across the array frames and, somewhere beyond the ops building, a car alarm going off. I make a decision. I don't deliberate about it, I just make it, and I start walking fast toward my truck. Not running. Running makes noise. I don't know if noise matters, but something in the back of my head says it does, and I've learned to listen to that part. My truck is a 2019 F-250 with a toolbox in the bed and a 1/4 tank of gas. I'd been meaning to fill it before driving out to the station this morning, and I didn't, because the station is only 40 miles from town, and I figured I'd fill it on the way back. I hate that I didn't fill it. I'm already doing the math on how far a 1/4 tank gets me as I'm walking, and the number keeps coming back as enough, but barely. I get to the truck. I get in. I lock the door, which feels almost silly, like a locked door means anything, but I lock it anyway. I sit there with my hands on the steering wheel, and I try to think. My phone shows 2 bars of signal. I pull up the internet, and the main news sites take 30 seconds to load, and when they do, I get fragments. Partial headlines, images that won't display, pages that time out. But I get enough. I get enough to understand that what I just saw isn't an isolated incident. I get a headline from a major wire service that says something about violent outbreaks in 7 states. I get a partial paragraph about emergency services overwhelmed. I get the word infection, and then the page times out and won't reload. I sit with that for a moment. Then I start the truck, and I pull out of the maintenance access road, heading south, toward the highway, toward town, because town is where food is and water is, and I need both if this is what it looks like it is. That was the last clear decisions I made for about 6 hours. The highway is 4 miles from the station via the service road. I get 2 miles down the service road before I see the first group on foot. 20, maybe 25 people, moving up the road from the highway toward the station. Moving that same wrong way. Some of them faster, some barely shuffling, but all of them with that same head-lolling, arm-hanging motion that I saw on the thing that chased Jeff. In the daylight, at distance, the way they move looks almost like a trick of the heat, like some kind of visual artifact, like your eyes are making a mistake. My eyes are not making a mistake. I stop the truck. They haven't seen me yet, or they haven't reacted yet, and the road is single lane with scrub, brush on both sides, and there is absolutely no way to get past 25 of whatever these are in a single lane service road. I look in my rear view. The road behind me is clear. I back up for 1.5 miles, slowly, in reverse, watching the group the whole time until they drop below the curve of the road behind me, and then I stop and sit there for a minute. There's a secondary access road. I know this because I've been coming out here for 3 years, and I know every road inside 20 miles from the station. Not because I explored them deliberately, but because driving around out here, when there's nothing else to do in the evenings, is something you end up doing. The secondary road branches off the main service road, about 1/2 mile north of where I currently am, and runs west-southwest for about 8 miles before hitting a county road. The county road eventually connects to the highway about 15 miles south of town. That's my route. I drive the secondary road at about 20 miles an hour because it's unpaved and my truck doesn't have great clearance and I can't afford a busted axle right now. The desert is quiet outside, heat shimmer on everything. A hawk circling something 1 mile to the east. I'm about 6 miles down the secondary road when the smoke column appears. Not a cooking fire, not someone burning brush. This is a column, wide, black, oily, rising from somewhere ahead and to my right to the west-southwest. Too big for a vehicle fire, too structured for a random blaze, and the wrong color for a building. That particular black usually means fuel, plastics, something chemical. I keep driving. The column gets closer and then the desert opens up. There's a shallow valley running west, and in the floor of the valley, about 1/4 mile off the road, there's something that should not be there. I slow down. I stop. I turn off the engine. There's a crater. Not a natural feature. I've been out here 3 years, and this particular stretch of desert was flat scrub a week ago when I drove past. The crater is roughly oval, maybe 40 meters across at the widest point, with a raised rim of displaced earth and rock. And in the middle of the crater, partially buried and partially intact, is something. I don't have the right word yet. I know what it isn't. It isn't a passenger jet, wrong shape, no wings. It isn't a military aircraft. I've seen enough military hardware at government facilities to know what military hardware looks like, and this isn't it. It isn't a meteor because meteors don't have what this has, which appears, even at a 1/4 mile distance through heat haze, to be a hull, a shaped, manufactured hull, panels of something dark and slightly iridescent like oil on asphalt, but without the randomness. Structured, deliberate. It's a spacecraft. I sit in my truck for a full minute just looking at it. Then I think, okay. And then I think, I need to understand what I'm looking at before I do anything else. And then I think, the secondary road is going to take me right past it. And then I think, there is a horde of whatever those were between me and the only good route south, and a smoking alien ship in a crater 40 meters off my only other route, and the question becomes, which thing is more immediately dangerous? I decide the ship is less dangerous than the dead people who move wrong. I drive another quarter-mile, pull off onto the hardpan, and stop about 30 meters from the crater rim. Up close, the ship is bigger than it looked from the road. The crater is about 4 meters deep at the center, and the ship sits in it at about a 45-degree angle. The nose, or what I'm interpreting as the nose, is embedded in the crater wall, and the aft section is elevated, tilted up, and slightly left. The hull is intact enough to tell it's a single contiguous object, roughly elongated ovoid in shape, like a flattened egg, maybe 25 meters from tip to buried nose. Several panels along the upper aft section are missing or blown outward, and there's a section near what I'd call the midsection where something has punched through from inside. The edges of the breach are curled outward, which means the pressure event happened internally. Smoke is coming from the breach. Not flames, the fire is mostly out, but there's still thermal activity in there. Something that's been burning and is now cooling, and the smoke is thin and gray now instead of the thick black column I saw from the road. There's no sound from it. There are also no bodies. No crew members, no evidence of ejection, no debris field that suggests organic material. The only things scattered around the crater rim are hardware. Fragments of panel, what looks like structural members made of something that isn't metal exactly, but isn't not metal either, some kind of matte black material that catches the light differently depending on angle. I pick up a piece the size of my hand, and it's lighter than aluminum, but rigid, no flex at all. I stand at the crater rim for about 5 minutes. The desert is still quiet. The smoke thins further, and then a panel on the lower aft section of the ship, a panel that had been sitting flush with the hull, cracks its seal with a sound like a pressure valve releasing, and swings outward on some kind of hydraulic mount, and reveals a dark opening about 1.5 meters wide and maybe 1 meter tall. I stand there looking at it. No movement inside. No sound. The darkness in the opening is absolute, because the desert light is so bright that my eyes can't adjust to what's inside. I get back in my truck. I drive around to the north side of the crater to see the opening from a different angle. Still nothing visible inside. I sit there for probably 4 minutes and nothing changes. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking somewhere between 15 and 30 of those things are between me and the highway south. The secondary road west is my only other option, and it runs through open country for 8 miles before hitting the county road, which means 8 miles of exposed single-lane hardpan with nowhere to hide if something's on the road ahead. My truck has maybe 80 miles of fuel left. I don't have food in the truck. I have half a thermos of cold coffee and a granola bar that's been in the center console for probably 2 weeks. And there's an intact structure right in front of me that appears to be sealed and has an opening I can close behind me. It's not a complicated decision. I mean, it's insane. It's completely insane, but the math isn't complicated. I take my tool bag out of the truck bed. It weighs about 40 pounds and has almost everything useful you can carry if you work in satellite. Communications, multimeter, wire strippers, a small oscilloscope, cable ties, electrical tape, a good flashlight and 2 backup flashlights, spare batteries, a utility knife, 3 different screwdriver sets, a small pry bar, gloves, and a dust mask I used exactly once for a filter replacement. I take the granola bar. I take the coffee thermos. I take the short-handled fire axe I keep in the truck bed, because twice I've had to cut fence posts that fell across access roads. I stand at the crater rim. I climb down. The crater walls are loose. The impact churned the desert floor, and it's mostly dry clay and rock fragments, and it gives way under my boots, so I half slide to the bottom. The ship is right there, close enough to touch, and up close the hull's surface is extraordinary. Not smooth like painted metal, more like textured in a way that changes with angle, microgeometry on the surface that makes it look different depending on where the light hits. Cool to the touch despite sitting in a desert crater for what I estimate is somewhere between 12 and 36 hours. That's strange. Metal in direct desert sun gets hot enough to burn your hand. This isn't even warm. The opening is on the low side of the ship given its current tilt, so the floor inside is at an angle. I shine my flashlight in. Empty. No crew, no bodies, no equipment that's immediately recognizable. What I can see is a corridor, curved walls, the same hull material on the interior, a floor that's got some kind of textured gripping surfaces on it, handrails on both walls, recessed lighting that's currently dead. At the end of the corridor, about 4 meters in, there's a hatch. Circular, roughly 1.5 meters in diameter, and it's open. I duck through the opening. The smell inside is hard to describe. Clean. Too clean, the way a room smells when all the organic elements have been scrubbed out, like the inside of a new refrigerator but without the plastic smell. And something else underneath that, faintly. Not unpleasant, just odd, like ozone but warmer. The corridor curves slightly to the left. My boots on the floor make a sound that seems too loud in the enclosed space, hollow click with each step. The hull material on the interior walls doesn't conduct sound the way metal does, it sort of absorbs it, and the result is this slightly dead acoustic quality that's disorienting. I reach the open hatch. Through it, a larger space. Not a cockpit in any sense I recognize. No obvious seat arrangement, no conventional instrument cluster. The space is roughly circular, maybe 6 meters across, with a slightly domed ceiling, about 2.5 meters high. Along the curved walls there are what I can only call stations, recessed alcoves, each one containing a surface that's flush with the wall but a different texture, almost like touchscreens but with no display. Most of them are dark. One of them, about 30 degrees to my left, has a faint glow. Not a display exactly, more like the surface itself has a very low level of luminescence. A blue-gray that's barely perceptible in the darkness. There's a seat. One, in the center of the room, facing nothing in particular, low to the floor, and contoured in a way that isn't shaped for a human body. Too shallow in the back, too wide at the hips, made for something with a different pelvic structure. But a seat. I don't sit in it. I stand in the middle of that circular room and slowly turn around and look at everything, and my brain is doing this thing where it just keeps producing rational technical observations, finish quality, apparent materials, spatial arrangement. Because if I stop doing that and let the other thought in, the thought that says you're standing inside an alien spacecraft in the Mojave Desert while dead people walk around outside, I'm going to fall apart. So I keep observing. The hatch behind me, the one I came through from the corridor, has an internal mechanism. I can see it on the inner face, a rotating handle, not unlike an aircraft emergency exit, and below it what appears to be a locking bar. I test it. The mechanism moves freely. I pull the hatch closed. The seal engages with that same pressure release sound, just in reverse, and the hatch sits flush and tight in its frame. I'm sealed inside an alien spacecraft in a desert crater. I stand there for a moment and let that sit. Then I find a corner of the circular room that feels stable, near the wall, away from the open section of ceiling where the light comes in from the breach. And I sit on the floor with my back against the hull, and I drink the rest of my cold coffee and eat the 2-week-old granola bar and try to think through what comes next. What comes next is, I need food. I have maybe 12 hours before the granola bar situation becomes an actual problem. I need water more urgently The thermos is empty now, and I've been sweating in the desert heat since about 8 this morning, and it's now probably 1:30 in the afternoon. I need to understand this structure. What's intact, what's damaged, what that single glowing surface means, whether there are other entry points I'm not controlling. And I need to figure out what's happening outside before I make any moves. I start with the glowing surface. It's in the third alcove to the left of the main hatch, at about chest height. The glow is very faint. In bright light, I probably wouldn't have noticed it. I hold my hand up to it, and there's a slight warmth, like a screen that's been on standby. The surface itself is smooth, no seams, no buttons. I touch it. Nothing. I press. Nothing. I drag a finger across it. The glow intensifies by about 20%. Just the glow. No display, no text, no information. But something registered that touch. I spend about 10 minutes experimenting with different inputs, pressure variations, different finger counts, tracing shapes. Eventually, I find that a 2-finger press held for about 3 seconds produces a different response. The glow shifts from blue-gray to a warmer amber, and there's a very low subsonic vibration through the floor that lasts about 2 seconds, and then stops, like something spinning up and deciding not to. The ship has some power left. Not much, but some. I move on. I do a full survey of the interior. The corridor I came in through connects to the circular room. There's a second corridor off the far side of the circular room, and it's blocked. About 2 meters in, the ceiling has partially collapsed, hull sections pressing down, impassable. I can see light through the gap, which means the breach I saw from outside is on the other side of that. Collapse. The collapsed section is structural. I'm not moving it without equipment I don't have. So, one entrance, one circular main space, one blocked corridor. The geometry is simple. The structure feels solid. The impact damage is concentrated at the nose, which is buried, and the aft breach, which is in the blocked corridor. The section I'm in appears undamaged. It's cooler in here than outside. Significantly cooler. I don't know if this is active climate control on the remaining power or just the thermal properties of the hull material, but the difference is enough to matter. Outside it's pushing 105 in the shade. In here it's maybe 72. That solves one problem. Heat stress will not get me in the next few hours. The water problem remains. I think about my truck. My truck is 30 meters away on the other side of the crater rim. I have a water jug in the truck bed. I always keep one, a 5-gallon plastic jug, because I've worked in the desert long enough to know what happens when you don't. If I go back to the truck, get the water jug, and get back inside, I have 5 gallons. That's several days, rationed properly. The question is what's between me and the truck. I open the hatch and listen for a full 2 minutes. Desert silence, wind, nothing moving that I can hear. I go out fast, up the corridor, out the opening, across the crater floor, up the loose slope of the rim, over the top. My truck is right there. I go to the bed, grab the water jug. It's heavy, almost full, and I grab 2 things I didn't take the first time. A folded emergency blanket that lives under the back seat, and a small duffel bag I keep behind the passenger seat that has a change of clothes and some random stuff from the last time I stayed overnight at the station. I look inside the duffel. 2 protein bars, a jacket, a phone charger that's useless right now, a pack of wet wipes, a small first aid kit, and a flashlight I didn't know I still had. I also look in the glove compartment. Small notepad, 2 pens, a road map I've never used, and $17 in loose cash. I take the notepad and pens. I also take the fire axe out of the bed, and while I'm there, I check the toolbox. I've been using it all week, and there are things in there beyond my standard bag. Additional cable, wire nuts, a roll of copper grounding strap, a spare radio, a handheld 2-way, the kind I use to communicate with the signal monitoring team when I'm out on the arrays. I take the radio. I check the battery. 60%. I take the spare AAA batteries from the toolbox as well. I'm back at the crater rim when I hear a sound from the north. Not a close sound. Maybe a quarter mile, maybe more. But familiar enough, that particular shuffling, scraping sound that I heard when Jeff was running. The acoustics of the flat desert carry it with this weird clarity, like the sound is right next to me and far away at the same time. I don't look for it. I go over the rim and down into the crater and back through the opening, and I pull it closed behind me and stand in the dark corridor, breathing hard, listening. Nothing comes. I wait 5 minutes, 10. The sound doesn't get closer. Whatever was out there moved in a different direction, or stopped. I go back into the main circular room and I sit down and I open the first aid kit and I check what's in it. Gauze, medical tape, a few alcohol wipes, 2 bandages, a small tube of antibiotic ointment, and some over-the-counter ibuprofen. Not much, but better than nothing. I write the inventory in the notepad. This is something I do automatically, something ingrained from 3 years of equipment auditing. You always know what you have. So I write it all down. Food, 2 protein bars, 2-week-old granola bar already consumed. Water, approximately 4.8 gallons remaining in jug. Medical, first aid kit contents listed above. Tools, full satellite tech bag plus fire axe, grounding strap, spare cables, communication, 1 two-way radio at 60%, spare AA batteries, phone with 2 bars signal but no data loading reliably, shelter, alien spacecraft, Mojave Desert, 45-degree tilt, partially buried, structurally sound in the aft 2/3, single entrance. I look at that line for a while. Then I flip the page and start writing down what I know about what's outside. Which isn't much. The outbreak, whatever the news fragments were describing, is fast and widespread. The infected are bipedal, move at varying speeds, seem drawn to sound. They don't appear to coordinate. The group I saw on the service road were moving in roughly the same direction, but not with any obvious organization. More like individual trajectories that happen to be similar. They don't appear to be tool-using. The one I watched go after Jeff moved fast in a straight line and stopped when it had what it wanted. That's it. That's the whole inventory of what I know. I add one more note. Station is compromised, Jeff down, unknown status of remaining personnel. I close the notebook and lie down on the angled floor, using my tool bag as a pillow, and stare up at the curved ceiling of the circular room. One of the recessed light strips shows a faint amber glow now, a response to the power manipulation I did earlier, or residual from the same activation. I don't know. It's enough to see by if I let my eyes adjust. I'm in a crashed alien spacecraft in the Nevada desert, and there are people outside who aren't people anymore. I fall asleep around 3 in the afternoon. I don't mean to. My body just closes down. When I wake up, it's dark inside the ship, and I can tell by the temperature shift and the changed quality of the silence outside that it's evening. I check my phone. 6:47 p.m. My phone shows 1 bar of signal now. No data loading at all. I eat one of the protein bars very slowly. I try the 2-way radio. Channel 1, nothing. Channel 2, static. Channel 3, static. Channel 4, very faint, barely detectable. Someone talking. I hold the radio close to my ear and turn the volume up full. Anybody receiving on Channel 4, please respond. This is. The voice breaks up, comes back. Shelter at the intersection of Route 9 and the county road. We have injured. We need. Static. Gone. Route 9 and the county road is about 12 miles from my current position. I press the transmit button. I'm receiving you. My name is Ryan. I'm sheltering in the desert, about 12 miles northwest of Route 9. What's your situation? I wait. Static for about 20 seconds. Then, Ryan, say again your location. We have. Breaks up. Can you come to us? I have no transport right now. What's at your location? How many people? More static. The signal is inconsistent, drifting. 4 of us. 2 injured. Garrett took a static. Bit on the arm. We lock the building, but they're outside. We can see. I close my eyes. Garrett needs to be isolated, I say. If he was bitten, he needs to be away from the others. Static. A long pause. Then a different voice, lower, rougher. Yeah, we know. His wife is here. That's the problem. I don't say anything for a moment. The first voice comes back. Are you safe where you are? Safe enough. Limited supplies. I have a plan to get food and water tomorrow. I don't mention the spacecraft. I don't know why I don't mention it. Instinct, I guess. Or just the fact that it would require too much explanation in broken radio communication. What's your building? What kind of structure? Auto parts store. Concrete block, 1 story. Rolled steel shutters on the windows, and we've got the front door barricaded. But we're low on. Static. And Garrett, static, won't make it without. The signal drops entirely. I try to raise them again for 10 minutes on channel 4. Nothing. I write down what I know about that location. Route 9 and the county road. Auto parts store. 4 survivors, 2 injured, 1 bitten. Concrete block structure, rolled steel shutters. 12 miles. I look at that for a long time. Then I lie back down on the angled floor of the spacecraft and stare at the amber glow above me and think about 12 miles in a quarter-tank truck across desert roads that may or may not have groups of the infected on them, toward people I don't know, one of whom is probably going to be a significant problem for the others by the time I get there. I think about it for a long time. I fall back asleep around 9. The next morning I wake up with a plan, which is both a better and a worse state to be in than having no plan. Better because direction is better than paralysis. Worse because having a plan means you have to execute it. And execution always costs something. The plan is in 3 parts. Part 1. Explore the spacecraft fully before doing anything else. I've been in here 12 hours and I've done a cursory survey, but I haven't been systematic. Part 2. Drive to the nearest town, which is Creston, about 22 miles east. Fill the truck's tank if there's a gas station that's accessible. Take everything useful from any accessible structure and return. Part 3. Make a decision about the 12 miles to Route 9. Part 1 takes about 2 hours. The circular main room is 6 meters in diameter. The blocked corridor leads to what was apparently the aft section. I can see through the gap in the collapsed ceiling that there are at least 2 more spaces back there, but they're not accessible. The main room itself, carefully examined in daylight that filters through the breach via the blocked corridor, turns out to have more to it than I saw in the dark. 4 of the alcoves have surface panels. 3 are completely inert. No response to any input. The 4th is the one I found yesterday, the amber glowing one. But adjacent to that, slightly lower, there's a surface I missed yesterday because it's not flush with the wall. It's recessed about 1 inch and slightly angled. Matte black, not luminescent. I run my fingers across it and it's cold, colder than the wall around it, and there's a faint but distinct vibration in it. Not a machine vibration, nothing rhythmic, more like the vibration you feel in a cable under tension. Something is still active back there. On the other side of that surface, drawing power. I press the 2-finger hold that activated the amber panel, and after 3 seconds, the recessed black panel does something different. The color shifts, or more precisely, a different layer of the surface becomes visible. Like depth suddenly appears in what seemed like a flat surface, not a screen. More like looking into something, like the surface has become a window into a volume of space about the size of a shoebox, but positioned impossibly within a panel that's only a centimeter thick. I stare at it for a while. Inside the apparent depth there are patterns, not random. I've looked at enough oscilloscope outputs and signal analysis graphs to recognize structure when I see it. These are organized, layered, and they're changing. Slowly, the changes are on the order of minutes, not seconds, but definitely changing. Something is updating in there. Some kind of data visualization, or a process output, or a status display. I just can't read it. I photograph it with my phone, which has dropped to 0 bars of signal, and is now completely offline, but still works as a camera. I take about 20 photos from different angles and different distances. Then I leave the ship. My truck starts. The fuel gauge is where I left it. I put the fire axe on the passenger seat, close enough to grab. Creston is 22 miles east on the county road. I know it. I've driven through it a dozen times in 3 years. Population maybe 3,000. One main strip with a gas station, a diner, a hardware store, a small grocery, a pharmacy, a farm supply store. Nothing else of note. Quiet place. The kind of place that shows up on nobody's radar. I take the county road east. The first 4 miles are empty. Nothing on the road, nothing moving in the desert on either side. The morning air is still, and the light is flat white, and the silence of it has this quality that I keep trying to push away. It's not the normal silence of the desert. The normal silence of the desert still has life in it. Insects, birds, the sound of wind across scrub. This silence is full of absences. At mile 6 I pass a pickup truck on the shoulder. Driver's door open, engine off. No one in or near it. A woman's shoe in the road 100 meters past it. Just one shoe, a flat sandal, no blood visible. At mile 9 I pass the first group. 6 of them, walking east on the road shoulder. I slow. Evaluate the clearance. Plenty of space to pass without getting close. And I drive past at about 30 miles an hour. None of them turn fast enough to be a problem. One of them turns its head and tracks me with its eyes as I pass. And I catch that in my rear view, and my hands tighten on the wheel. The eyes were tracking, active, aware of me as something different from the background. But without the speed to do anything about it, at 30 miles per hour, so all it can do is stand there and turn its head. I think about that for the next 3 miles. The eye tracking, the awareness. Whatever is driving the infected, it isn't blind or random. It registers stimulus and responds to it. Sound and motion. That's the threat model. Stay quiet. Stay fast when you have to move. Don't linger. Creston comes into view at the top of a long, gentle rise, and I slow down and look. A quarter mile, the town looks almost normal. The buildings are standing. Nothing is burning. But there are shapes in the main street, maybe 20, maybe 30, moving, and a car in the intersection has plowed into the front of the diner, crashed and stopped. Drivers side up on the sidewalk. The gas station is on the north edge of the main strip, and it looks clear from here. I turn off the county road before the main strip, using a side road that runs behind the commercial buildings. The gas station's back lot is accessible from the side road. I pull in through the back. The rear of the gas station is a service area with an overhead door that's closed and a regular door that's also closed. No infected visible back here. I look at the fuel situation. The pumps are at the front of the building, facing the main strip, which has 30 infected on it. The pumps won't work without power anyway. The underground tanks are accessible, but getting fuel out of underground tanks without a pump is a dedicated operation that I don't have the equipment for right now. I look at what I do have access to. The back service door. I get out of the truck, go to the door, try the handle. Locked. I look at the lock's standard deadbolt. I look at the fire axe in my hand. I think about the noise. 30 infected on the main strip around the corner. I don't know how fast sound carries in this layout. Building in between, concrete block construction. Maybe enough damping. I knock instead. Not a request kind of knock. A testing knock. 3 sharp raps, then I step to the side of the door and wait. 15 seconds. Nothing. I test the hinge side of the door. Residential grade, not commercial. I put the blunt face of the axe against the door frame near the latch, and I lean into it hard and sharp. One impact, and the frame gives. The latch side pops free, and the door swings open, and I slip inside fast and pull it closed behind me. Dark inside. I have my flashlight. Back room is all service supplies. Motor oil in quarts and gallons, brake fluid, washer fluid, a rack of filters, a stack of tire patch kits, a rolling tool chest that belongs to someone who works here, a small refrigerator. I open the refrigerator, 4 energy drinks, a sandwich in a paper bag, someone's leftover something in a container, a bottle of water. I take all of it. I also take 4 quarts of motor oil, not for drinking, for the truck engine, and the biggest tire patch kit on the rack and a can of Fix-A-Flat. I go through the door into the main convenience area. Empty. No infected inside. The front windows and door face the main strip, and through the windows I can see several of them out there. Close enough that I move low and stay back from the glass. I move through the store systematically and fast. Shelves of packaged food. Chips, jerky, nuts, candy, protein bars, crackers, dried fruit. I have my duffel and I fill it. I find a paper bag behind the counter and fill that too. I go to the beverage cooler along the back wall. It's still cold. The power must still be on locally. And I take every water bottle and sports drink that will fit in the remaining space in the bag. 6 water bottles, 4 sports drinks. Behind the counter there are lighters, a display stand with maybe 30 lighters. I take them all and dump them in a side pocket. There are also maps, 2 regional road maps. I take both. There's a charging cable for a common phone type that also matches mine. I take it. In the back cabinet under the register there's a first aid kit, larger than the one in my truck bag. A proper workplace kit, red case, sealed. I take it. There's also a can of pepper spray that probably belongs to someone who worked the late shift. I take it. I find one more thing that matters significantly. On a shelf in the back room, buried under some automotive paperwork, a hand crank radio. Small, cheap, the kind they sell alongside emergency candles and flashlight sets. Battery and hand crank powered. I turn the hand crank for 30 seconds and turn it on. It produces a clear FM signal, which means it works. I carry everything to the back door, load the truck. 30 seconds, 2 trips, quiet and fast. Then I go back inside once more because I thought of something, the small propane canisters. They sell them for camp stoves, little 1-pound cylinders, usually by the door. I find 8 of them. I also find a small camp stove still in its box behind the counter display. Food, water, fire, light, communication, and no fuel for the truck. The fuel problem requires a different approach. I look at the service bay. There's a vehicle in there. I can see it through the internal window from the main area. A customer's car that was in for service when the outbreak hit. I look at the fuel gauge visible through the windshield, nearly full. And there's a fuel transfer hose in the toolbox in the service bay. I know how to siphon fuel. It's not complicated. I spend 20 minutes moving fuel from the customer's car to my truck using the transfer hose. I get about 8 gallons, which brings my tank to roughly 3/4. This is slower than I want it to be, and noisier. The fuel line makes a gurgling sound as it flows, and I keep stopping and listening and starting again. I don't stop working until I hear something on the other side of the service bay overhead door. Not movement, sound. The shuffling, scraping sound, right outside the overhead door. I go completely still. I'm crouched next to my truck with the transfer hose in my hands, and I stop breathing for a long moment. The sound passes, moves south along the building exterior, and then I lose it. I detach the transfer hose, cap both tanks, get in my truck, and leave the way I came. The drive back to the spacecraft takes 25 minutes. I take a different route home, looping further south to avoid the area where I saw the group of 6 on the way in. Nothing challenges me. The desert is empty. The sky is a brutal flat blue. I back the truck into the crater, or as close as I can get. The rim is too steep to drive over, but I can get the truck parked on the hardpan about 10 meters from the rim edge, close enough to minimize exposure. I unload everything into the ship in 4 trips, restacking it in the alcoves along the circular room wall. Then I sit down with the hand crank radio and start working through frequencies. FM is mostly dead, pre-recorded content still cycling on automated stations in some places, but nothing live that I can find. AM produces more. Fragments of emergency broadcast, a looping recorded message on 1040 that instructs people to remain indoors and await government contact, another on 920 that sounds like it's been playing the same 15 seconds on a loop for so long the recording has started to degrade. And then, at the far end of the AM dial, in the region around 1580, where nobody broadcasts anything useful under normal circumstances, I find a voice, a real voice, live. Checking in from what I'm calling day 3. We're at the agricultural depot, north side of Creston, the big building with the grain silos. You'll know it from the road. We have 11 people here, including a 7-year-old. We have water and a 2-week supply of canned food. We have no weapons, and we have infected on the south and east perimeters. If you're hearing this, we're broadcasting on a salvaged ham set. We're on 1580 AM, and we check in every morning at 9 and every evening at 7. If you can hear this and you can help, please respond. We do not know how to boost this signal. We do not know how far this is carrying, but we're here. I look at the radio for a long time. Then I look at my notebook, where I wrote down the location of the 4 survivors at Route 9 and the county road. Then I look around the circular room of the spacecraft. The packed supplies against one wall, the amber glow of the single active panel, the recessed black surface with its impossible depth and slowly shifting patterns. 11 people at the agricultural depot on the north side of Creston. 4 people 12 miles away. At an auto parts store, one of them bitten. This changed my plan. I look at the second active panel, the recessed black one with the depth display, and I sit down in front of it and I start pressing combinations again. Not for any technical reason at first, just to have something to do with my hands while I think. 2-finger hold, amber intensification. 3-finger press, nothing. Single finger drag, the depth shifts slightly, the patterns rearrange. I try 4 fingers placed simultaneously and held. The floor vibration comes back. That 2-second subsonic pulse. But this time it doesn't stop after 2 seconds. It continues, gets slightly stronger, and the deep display changes fundamentally. The layered patterns organize into something different, something that feels less like a status display and more like a structure. Like a map. I lean close. It's not a map of geography, no terrain, no roads. But the spatial logic is there. Nodes and connections between nodes, and something about the density of the connections suggests hierarchy. Some nodes are more connected than others. And in the center of the whole thing, pulsing very slowly, is a node that's different from the others. Brighter. More connected. And the connections radiating from it have a quality the others don't. They point outward, away from the center, like a broadcasting diagram, like a signal source. I know signal source diagrams. I make signal source diagrams for a living. Or I did, a week ago. I get my notepad and I start sketching what I'm seeing. The central node, brightest, most connected, directional radiation pattern. Secondary nodes at various distances, some of which appear fixed in position relative to each other, some of which appear to move. Slowly, barely perceptibly, but they shift. And at the periphery of the display, a cluster of secondary nodes that are different from the rest. Dimmer, less organized, and their connections to the central node aren't directional, they're chaotic. Random, like static. I stare at the cluster of chaotic peripheral nodes, and I feel something in my chest go cold and quiet. The central node is this ship. The directional connections are whatever this ship was broadcasting before it crashed. The fixed secondary nodes are, I don't know, infrastructure, other ships, installations of some kind. And the chaotic cluster at the periphery, the disorganized, dim, randomly connected group. I write in my notebook, Outbreak vector? I don't know what I mean by that yet. It's just a hypothesis, the kind of half-formed technical intuition you get when you're looking at a signal diagram and something in the pattern doesn't fit. I've felt this before. Looking at a spectrum analyzer output that should be clean and finding a frequency component that shouldn't be there. Your brain registers the wrongness before you can articulate it. Something is wrong about that cluster. I stare at it for a long time. Then I pull out the photos I took of the display yesterday, the earlier state of the panel, and compare them to what I'm seeing now. The overall structure is similar, but the chaotic cluster is different. In the early photos, the cluster has maybe 12 or 15 nodes. In the current display, it has more nodes that have gone dim and chaotic. The number is growing. I sit back on the angled floor with my notepad against my knee, and I write, transmission from this ship may have caused infection to spread. Or, transmission from this ship stopped the infection from being contained. Or, this display is showing me something about the nature of the infected, and I am completely misreading it. I underline that last one. Then I think, I need to find someone who can look at this and tell me if I'm wrong. The person I'm thinking of is at the agricultural depot on the north side of Creston. I don't know who that person is. I don't know if any of the 11 people sheltering in a grain silo are scientists or signal analysts or anything useful at all. But 11 people who manage to organize a radio broadcast and structure regular check-ins are not 11 people who are all going to be useless. Somebody in that group has a working brain. I start the truck. Creston is 22 miles east. I just came from there an hour ago. The agricultural depot is on the north side, which means I come in from the north and avoid the main strip entirely. I know the layout of Creston well enough. The depot is accessible via Old Mill Road, which runs north of the town proper and connects to the agricultural land on the edge. I haven't been to the depot specifically, but I've seen the grain silos 100 times. I drive. The route north of town is clear. I come down Old Mill Road at about 15 miles an hour, slower than before, more cautious, watching both sides. The fields on either side of the road are quiet. I see one shape in a field about 200 meters north, something walking in slow circles in an irrigation row between young crops, but it's far away and not aware of me. The depot comes into view, a large agricultural warehouse, corrugated steel walls, and yes, the grain silos, 3 of them cylindrical, standing probably 12 meters high, next to the main building. The access road to the depot comes off Old Mill Road and is gated. Heavy farm gate, currently closed. And standing on the inside of the gate is a person. A living person. Watching me. I stop the truck about 30 meters short of the gate. Roll down my window. I'm Ryan. I heard your broadcast. The person at the gate doesn't move immediately. Takes me in. Young, maybe mid-20s. Wearing a green jacket despite the heat, short hair, tired eyes. Not panicked. Evaluating. How do we know you're not? I'm not, I say. You can see I'm talking. I'm driving a truck. You know what they look like when they're not okay. A pause. Then, pull forward slowly. The gate opens. Someone else on the other side, out of my sight line. I pull forward and stop where a hand signal tells me to stop. And I get out of the truck with my hands visible. There are 4 people standing around the truck within 30 seconds. The person who spoke to me through the gate turns out to be a young woman. Early 20s, exhausted, jeans and the green jacket. Behind her is a man in his 50s, heavy-set, farmer build, flannel shirt with a rip in the shoulder. To my left, a younger man about my age, dark circles under his eyes, holding a length of pipe like it's a weapon he's not sure about. And behind him, partially blocked, a teenage boy about 16 who keeps looking at the south perimeter. Who else is in there? I ask. 7 more, the woman says. Inside. You came from the west? I've been sheltering about 22 miles out. In what? I pause. Here is the moment I've been thinking about since I heard the broadcast. Whether to disclose the spacecraft. I make a decision based on simple math. These people organized a radio broadcast, maintain a schedule, and have held their perimeter for at least 3 days. They are organized. Organized people can either help me or try to take what I have. The spacecraft isn't obviously visible or locatable from my description, so disclosure costs me little and might gain me something. You're going to think I'm making this up, I say. Try me, the woman says. Her name, I'll find out a few minutes later, is Becca Whitmore. She's 23. She was a first-year graduate student in agricultural sciences at the State University and came to the depot 3 days ago as a field placement. She's been running this group since the first night because, as the farmer, whose name is Walt, puts it, nobody else knew what to do and she just started doing things. I tell her about the spacecraft. Walt's face does a complicated series of things during this explanation. The young man with the pipe, his name is Derek. He's a farmhand who was working the harvest rotation, looks at Becca throughout it, tracking her reaction rather than processing my words directly. The teenager, who I'll later learn is Walt's son Robbie, is still watching the south perimeter. A spacecraft, Becca says, when I finish. I know how that sounds. No, She stops. There was something. On the 3rd of September, 3 days before the outbreak, the university radio telescope picked up an anomalous signal. I saw the report. Someone forwarded it to the department. A broadband pulse, very brief, source undetermined. Nobody thought much of it. I feel something in my chest shift. What frequency, I ask. I don't remember exactly. Something in the VHF range. Broad spectrum, though, not a narrow signal. I think about the directional connections radiating out from the central node in the ship's display. Broad spectrum VHF. Something that would propagate widely, touch everything, and not be easily traced to a point source. I need you to come look at something in the ship, I say. She looks at Walt. Walt looks at Derek. Derek looks at Robbie, who finally turns away from the south perimeter and looks at all of us. There's a group 12 miles south of here, I say. 4 people at a Route 9 auto parts store. One of them was bitten 3 days ago. I let that sit for a moment. I can try to reach them. But I need at least one person who can look at what I found in the ship and tell me if I'm reading it right. Becca says, Walt, can you manage the perimeter without me for a few hours? Walt says, been managing it since Tuesday. She says, I mean with the extra person gone. Walt's jaw moves. Yeah, take Derek. Derek doesn't need to come, I say, no offense. But the fewer people I'm responsible for on the road. Derek comes or nobody comes, Walt says, not aggressive, just decided. Derek tightens his grip on the pipe, which is clearly the only weapon anyone here has, and looks at me in a way that says he's equally unhappy about this arrangement. Fine, I say. Becca and Derek get in the truck. On the drive back to the spacecraft, I explain what I found. The display, the patterns, the apparent signal source diagram, the chaotic cluster that seems to be growing. Becca listens without interrupting, which I appreciate. Derek watches the road out the passenger window with the pipe across his lap. When I pull the truck up to the crater rim and say, it's down there, Becca gets out and looks over the edge, and the expression on her face is, I don't know how to describe it. It's not amazement exactly. It's like confirmation of something she didn't let herself believe. Is it safe to go in? She asks. I've been sleeping in it for 2 nights, I say. We go down the crater slope. Derek stays at the rim, by his choice, watching the hard pan around the truck. Inside the circular room, I show Becca the panel. She stands in front of it for a long time. She asks me to reproduce the 4-finger hold. That activated the current state of the display. I do it. The floor vibration. the display settling into the map structure. She studies it for about 10 minutes without speaking. Then she says, "This central node. You're saying it's the ship. Best interpretation. And these." She points at the directional connections radiating outward. "These are transmissions. Previous transmissions. That's what they look like to me. A radiation pattern. When did the ship crash? Do you know?" "I don't know the exact time. I saw the smoke column the morning after the outbreak started in the area. So crash on September 6th or early morning September 7th. The anomalous signal was September 3rd. She pauses. 4 days before the crash. Meaning the ship was transmitting before it crashed. Or something transmitting from the ship was transmitting, I say. I don't know if this is the only active system on the ship. The aft section is inaccessible. She nods slowly. Then she points at the chaotic cluster. These are getting worse, growing, more nodes going into that pattern. And your interpretation is? I don't have an interpretation, I say. I have an observation. The nodes that are in that pattern have different connection characteristics from the others. The connections are random, not directional. Whatever process was maintaining the organization of the signal network, these nodes have lost it. Becca is quiet for a moment. Then, very carefully, she says, "What if the signal, the VHF pulse, was a carrier signal? Something that delivered a payload, and the payload interacted with neurology, with the brain's own electrical signaling architecture. I think about this, a signal that rewrites how neurons fire. Not rewrites, degrades, reduces to something more basic, something that doesn't require complex signal maintenance, just the basic behavioral primitives." She pauses. If that's what this display is, if the chaotic cluster is showing infected individuals or infected population centers, then you can see it spreading in real time. We both look at the display. The cluster has, in the time since I first showed it to her, added 2 more nodes at its edges. "Is there anything in here that looks like it could stop a transmission?" she asks. I shake my head. I haven't found anything I can interact with beyond these 2 panels. The rest of the ship is inaccessible. What about the blocked corridor? I look at the collapsed ceiling in the blocked passage. I'd need to remove about 200 kilos of structural material to get through, maybe more. But behind it, that's where more systems would be. Almost certainly. Could you do it? Get through? Not alone. With tools and a second person, maybe. But making that much noise, I stop. The sound would carry. We'd have to plan it carefully. We go back up to the rim. Derek is standing where we left him, pipe in hand, scanning. He looks relieved when we emerge. "Well," he says. Becca says, "We need to go back to the depot. I need to get some things. And we need to decide what to do about the Route 9 group." She looks at me. "You said one of them was bitten 3 days ago. Whatever the progression is. The progression is fast," she says. "I watched someone turn at the university 2 days into the outbreak. It varies. Some people go in 36 hours. Some seem to hold longer. If 3 days have passed and the person at Route 9 is still alive, then either they haven't turned yet or they're an outlier." She stops. "Or the wife hasn't been able to do what needed to be done." I don't say anything. "We go to Route 9, Derek says. This is the most he's spoken since we left the depot. "We go to Route 9. I agree. We drive back to the depot first. Becca goes inside and emerges 20 minutes later with a backpack and a plastic case about the size of a briefcase. She explains what's in the case while we drive. A portable GPS unit, a soil testing kit she's adapted to test atmospheric composition, 2 two-way radios with a longer range than mine, and a tablet with downloaded maps of the region. The soil testing kit, I say. The carrier signal, if that's what it is, would have degraded in aerosol form if the delivery mechanism was airborne. I want to test for chemical trace compounds, something that shouldn't be in the air chemistry." She pauses. "I've been wondering about this since day one. Why some people turned and others didn't. At the university, I watched 3 people in the same building. 2 turned. 1 didn't. Either the exposure was different, proximity to something, or there's individual variation in susceptibility. Has anyone in your group at the depot shown symptoms? No, and we've been in contact with the outside. I've been out to check the perimeter every morning. She pauses. Walt was handling grain the morning the outbreak started. He's one of the most exposed people in our group, and he's completely fine. I've been thinking about that. The county road south runs clear. I push the truck to 50 and watch both sides. Route 9 and the county road intersection appears in about 22 minutes. The auto parts store is on the northeast corner. Concrete block building, big rolling sign, and yes, the steel shutters are down on the front windows. The parking lot has 2 cars in it. On the south side of the building, 2 infected move in slow circles near the dumpster. On the west side, 1 more, stationary. It's back against the wall. I drive past and park on the north side, which is clear. I get out slowly. I knock on the steel shutter, 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. A pattern, nothing for 20 seconds. Then from inside, a knock in response, 1 knock. My name is Ryan Calloway, I say, not loud. I talked to someone on Channel 4 2 nights ago. I'm at your north entrance. Movement inside. A bolt sliding. A door in the north wall opens. Not the main entrance, a side door, recessed and easy to miss, and a man looks out. He's about 40, short and compact, wearing a mechanic's shirt with somebody else's name on the patch. His eyes are hollow. 3 days of no sleep. The kind of face you see in disaster coverage, where the exhaustion has gone all the way to the back of the skull. Are you the radio guy? He asks. Yes. His name is Tim Hartley. He was a customer at the auto parts store when the outbreak hit, drove in to get a clutch spring and never left. The 2 other survivors with him are a woman named Carol Finch, a retiree who happened to be in the parking lot when people started running, and a young man named Paul, whose last name Tim doesn't know. A truck driver who made it on foot from where his rig stalled on Route 9. Garrett, the bitten man, is in the back room. Still alive, still himself. We go in. The inside of the auto parts store is dim with the shutters down. Emergency lighting on battery backup. 1 tube still working. Shelves of boxed parts, bins of hardware. The smell of machine oil and dust, and 3 people who haven't showered in 4 days. Garrett is in the storeroom. His wife, Ellen, is sitting outside the storeroom door on a folding chair, holding a coffee mug with nothing in it. She looks up when we come in. He's still. She stops. He's still him, she says. He talks. He knows who I am. How long? Becca asks gently. 3.5 days. The bite was Thursday morning. It's Sunday now. I do the math and then look at Becca. She looks at me. 3.5 days past exposure, and the man is still himself. Something is different here. Becca says, "Can I talk to him?" Ellen hesitates. The doctor, whatever you are, said you could come if. I'm a grad student in agricultural science, Becca says plainly. I'm not a doctor. But I've been watching this outbreak since day 1, and your husband might have something important to tell me about why he's still here. The door to the storeroom opens, not from Ellen, not from us, from the inside. Garrett stands in the doorway. He's tall, early 50s, gray hair. The bite wound on his left forearm is visible. Bandaged, but you can see the spread of bruising beyond the bandage. His eyes are clear, not the absence I've come to associate with the infected. Clear, present, tracking all of us with normal intelligence. You said I might tell you something, he says to Becca. Yes, she says. He looks at the wound on his arm. I've had it 3 days and it doesn't feel like what they described. What the news was saying before the news stopped. He sits down on a crate. I feel like I have the flu. My arm hurts. I'm tired. But I know exactly where I am and who these people are and what's happening. Were you out early on September 3rd? Becca asks. A few days before the outbreak. He frowns. The 3rd. I was. Yeah, I was driving Route 9 early, before sunrise, taking inventory photos at a storage unit about 15 miles west. West, I say, in the direction of the tracking station. What? He looks at me. There's a satellite tracking station about 40 miles west of here. September 3rd, there was an anomalous broadband signal, VHF range. If you were driving west on Route 9 before sunrise. Radio exposure? Garrett says slowly. Possibly. Becca, if the carrier signal, the VHF pulse, was the delivery mechanism, Becca says, and you were exposed to it directly on September 3rd, then you've had 4 days of whatever the payload is in your system before the infection reached you through the bite. You're saying because I was already sick from the signal I'm immune to the bite? Garrett asks. Not immune, resistant. Like a vaccination, imperfect, partial, but enough. Your immune system or your neurological system already encountered whatever it is and built some response to it. She pauses. This is a guess. This is entirely a guess. But you want a blood sample, Garrett says. Yes. He holds out his arm. Becca doesn't have proper medical equipment for a blood draw. She has the field kit, which has a basic lancet for soil moisture testing that also works for blood spotting on test strips. It's not a proper sample, but it's something. She prepares 2 strips. While she works, I'm thinking about the spacecraft, about the inaccessible aft section, about what a communications tech with satellite array experience and a set of salvage tools might be able to do about 200 kilos of collapsed structure if he had Derek's pipe and a full ratchet set and about 8 hours. I'm also thinking about the signal diagram in the ship's display, the growing chaotic cluster, the directional radiation pattern from the central node. If the ship transmitted a signal on September 3rd that started this whole chain, deliberately, as some kind of weapon or accidentally as a malfunction, there might be data in the inaccessible section, a log, a purpose record, something that tells us what the signal was and whether it can be reversed. And if it can be reversed, I stop myself. That's 17 steps ahead of where I am. Where I am is a concrete block auto parts store with 5 survivors and 1 partial immunity case, and a truck with 3/4 of a tank. We need to move these people, I say. The Route 9 group. Tim says, where? The agricultural depot north of Creston. 11 people, better supplies, more defensible structure. Garrett, Ellen starts. Garrett comes, I say. Especially Garrett. If what Becca thinks is right, he matters. I look at Tim. Can all of you move? Any injuries besides the bite? Paul, the truck driver, has a cut on his leg that was cleaned and wrapped. Mobile. Carol Finch is fine physically. She's 67, but she's been helping hold the perimeter here, and she moves with the practical efficiency of someone who grew up doing physical work. Tim is fine. 20-minute drive, I say. We go fast and we go quiet. Take the North Road. Avoid the main strip. We pack what the auto parts store has that's useful. A full automotive first aid kit from the shelf, stocked with more than the standard version, since it's commercial grade. 3 road flares. A pack of heavy-duty zip ties that turn out to be very useful for all kinds of things. 2 battery-powered work lamps, and the thing that makes Derek's face change for the first time since I met him. A 3-foot crowbar hanging on the tool display wall. Derek takes the crowbar. We load into my truck and Tim's car. Tim has a sedan in the back lot, and we caravan north to Old Mill Road. Walt sees us coming. The gate opens before we reach it. 9 people now at the depot. 11 plus new arrivals means 18, with 1 immunity case who is still potentially infectious. Becca discusses this with Walt while I help unload supplies. The question of where Garrett sleeps, whether his partial immunity makes him safe to the others, doesn't have a clean answer. Separate room, Becca says, not quarantine, just separate, until we understand better. Garrett agrees without comment. Ellen follows him. I pull Walt aside that evening after the newcomers have settled, after food has been distributed and watch schedules reorganized to account for new people. I need to go back to the ship tomorrow, I say. I need to get into the blocked section. I need Derek's crowbar, and I need help moving material. What for? Because I think there's a log in the aft section. Data. Something that tells us what the ship transmitted and why. And if it's what Becca thinks it might be. If it's what? Walt says. He's a careful man. He doesn't like open-ended sentences. If the broadcast from that ship is what started the infection, there might be a way to reverse it, or stop it spreading further. I look at him. I don't know that. It's a hypothesis. But the data's in there and I need to get to it. Walt chews on this. Take Derek. Take Robbie too. That boy needs something useful to do before he goes stir-crazy. He pauses. 3 people? 3 is enough if the corridor collapse isn't worse than I think. Come back by dark. Yes. That night I lie in the depot on a camp mat and I look at the ceiling and I think about the display in the ship. The slowly growing chaotic cluster. The directional radiation lines from the central node going quiet now. The ship crashed, the transmitter damaged or depleted. But the damage already done, already spreading through population vectors that have nothing to do with radio anymore. The infected spread by bite now. The original signal just started it. Started it deliberately or by accident? I don't know. I won't know until I get into the aft section. I fall asleep thinking about the map of signal nodes and the single central one that was this ship. In the morning, I wake to Robbie shaking my shoulder. Becca says, come look at something before you go. Becca is in the main warehouse space with Garrett. She's been up since before dawn, apparently, running her improvised atmospheric tests. She holds up 2 test strips, side by side. These are from outside the depot, taken this morning. Standard air chemistry. She puts those aside and holds up 2 more. These are from my kit samples taken inside the spacecraft yesterday. I look at the second pair. Different. Specifically, a compound showing up in trace quantities that isn't present in the first pair. She explains it in terms I have to work to follow. A modified organic compound, low molecular weight, the kind that would be stable in aerosol form, and could potentially cross the blood-brain barrier given sufficient concentration or duration of exposure. So it was airborne, I say. The signal pulse delivered the compound, aerosolized it directly, or caused a reaction in atmospheric particulates that produced it. The atmosphere inside the ship still has trace concentrations, suggesting the ship carried it before the crash. She pauses. Or generated it, as a secondary effect of the transmission system. Is it still active? The compound? In the atmosphere outside? Probably degraded by now. Exposure to UV light would break it down within 48 hours, maybe less, which is consistent with why the infection stopped spreading by airborne route and is now only spreading by direct contact. She pauses. The compound in the ship is more concentrated. It's been sealed in there, protected from UV. It's still active. I look at her. You went in without any breathing protection. I know. Flat voice. I know. And I've been sleeping in there for 2 nights. A pause. Your exposure level in 2 days of intermittent presence is probably below the threshold for full conversion, she says carefully. The threshold that produces the aggressive behavioral state requires prolonged high-concentration exposure. What you got was likely sub-threshold. You're fine. Likely, I say. Ryan, I know, let's just I stop. Take a breath. Okay, so when we go into the aft section today, we need breathing protection. At minimum. I have dust masks in my pack. Not ideal, but better than nothing. I'd suggest limiting time inside. Agreed. I look at her. Are you coming? Yes, she says. Walt can hold the perimeter this morning. I need to see what's in that aft section. Derek, Robbie, Becca, and I drive to the ship. The crater looks the same in the morning light, impassive, alien. The smoke from the breach is completely gone now. The thermal event has fully cooled. We put on dust masks before going down the slope. Inside the corridor, the ozone and something smell is stronger than I remembered. 2 more days of the compound accumulating in the sealed space. Or I'm more sensitive to it now that I know what it is. The collapse section is worse than I hoped and better than I feared. 2 large structural members have come down. They're the same dark matte material as the hull, lightweight but rigid, and they're wedged against the floor and the walls, creating the blockage. 3 smaller panels have come down on top of them. It's not the ceiling that collapsed, it's more like internal partitions, dividing walls between sections of the corridor, and the impact damage shifted them out of their channels. Derek puts the crowbar on the bottom structural member. He leans into it. It moves. It moves a lot easier than I expected. The material is genuinely light, lighter than aluminum, and once Derek breaks the wedge friction at the base, the structural member slides back about 1 meter, and we can wrestle it aside. 20 minutes of work on the 3 of us. Robbie turns out to have real physical strength. Surprising for a 16-year-old, he just puts his whole body into things without hesitation. And we have a passage about 90 centimeters wide that we can squeeze through sideways. The aft section is 2 spaces. The first is smaller than the main room, maybe 4 meters across. This is where the hull breach is. Overhead, a section of hull about 2 meters square is missing, either blown out or torn by the impact, and the open blue sky sits above. The floor of this space is scattered with debris, small equipment fragments, the same dark panel material, and several objects I can't categorize, roughly a void, each about 20 centimeters long, scattered everywhere like they fell from something. I pick one up. Dense, heavier than the hull material, dark, no visible seams or controls. A closed container of some kind. I put it in my tool bag. I take 3 more. I take every one I can find. There are 11 in total. Becca stands in the middle of this space and slowly turns around. She's looking at the walls. Ryan, I look where she's looking. On the walls of this space, different from the main room, not alcoves, not panels, actual displays, screens, genuinely, unmistakably, rectangular, set into the wall at eye height, maybe 40 centimeters wide and 30 tall, 6 of them arranged in a row along the curved wall. All dark, dead, and beside them, a surface interface I recognize from the main room, the same recessed panel type, the same matte black, the same cold temperature differential, and next to that, something I haven't seen before, a physical component. Not a surface, not a panel. An actual device, cylindrical, about 40 centimeters long, mounted to the wall on a bracket, and running from it a cable. A cable in the conventional sense, bundled conductors in a sheath, not printed circuitry or biological routing. A cable that runs to a junction point on the wall and disappears into the hull. A cable I can work with. The power in the main room, the amber panel, the depth display, it's coming from something, I say. A source somewhere in this section, because the power would route through here. If the breach killed some systems, others might still be drawing from the same source. I kneel by the cable junction. If I can trace this and find the power source, I might be able to reroute. Becca goes to the displays. She runs her fingers across them. If we can get these working, there might be a log, I say, a record of what the ship transmitted and why, or at least the transmission data, or a communication, Becca says quietly. I look at her. Someone sent this ship, she says. Someone might be trying to contact it. We both let that sit for a moment in the cool, ozone-tinged air of the aft space. Robbie pokes his head through the passage. You need me in there? Yes, I say. Find every cable, junction, or conduit you can see on the floor and walls and tell me where it goes. Robbie is thorough. He spends 40 minutes crawling around the aft space, calling out observations while I take notes and build a rough wiring diagram. The power routing turns out to be A source in the deepest part of the ship, inaccessible, behind a third internal structure, feeding through 2 junction points in the aft space, and then forward to the main room. The junction points are accessible. One of them is intact. The other shows heat damage consistent with the internal pressure event. Scorched surfaces, a melted connection at one conductor path. The intact junction is currently routing maybe 20% of the source power forward to the main room. The damaged junction is dead. If I can bypass the damaged junction and restore the full circuit, I might get more power to the forward systems, more power to the displays. I spend 3 hours working on the junction bypass. This is not straightforward. The connector architecture is not anything I've worked with before. The conductors are not copper and not anything I recognize. And my standard wire connectors won't grip the material directly. But the grounding strap I took from the station supply truck, copper, flexible, with proper termination fittings, turns out to be long enough to bridge the damaged section of the circuit if I can establish contact at both ends of the bypass. The contact points are the problem. The conductor material is smooth and extremely hard, and my standard clips won't hold on it. I spend an hour trying different approaches. Eventually, I use the following. I wrap the copper strap terminal around the conductor 3 times in a tight coil, then use zip ties, the heavy-duty commercial ones from the auto parts store, to clamp the coil tight against the conductor surface. Not a great electrical connection, but potentially enough to pass current. I do this at both ends. I stand up, stretch my back, and look at Becca. If this works, it's going to do something to the forward room. Possibly something we don't expect. If you hear anything change out there, Robbie and Derek are in the main room. Robbie calls through, "We're ready." I complete the bypass circuit. The subsonic vibration hits immediately. Not the 2-second pulse. This is sustained. The whole floor of the spacecraft, vibrating at a frequency below hearing, but completely present through my boots and legs and hands on the wall. Then the displays on the wall light up. Not all of them, 3 of the 6. But they light up. They show data. Becca is in front of them in 2 steps. I crowd in next to her. The leftmost display shows something like a trajectory map. A path plotted through what I interpret as spatial coordinates, with a start point and an end point, and a variance cloud around the end point that explains why the spacecraft is in a desert crater, instead of wherever it was supposed to be. The end point of the trajectory has a small symbol next to it that I can't read, but its position on the map corresponds roughly to the location of the tracking station. The ship was heading to the tracking station. Specifically, not a random crash. The middle display shows what I interpret as a transmission log. There are time-stamped equivalents. Not in any system I can read directly, but clearly structured as time records, and associated with each timestamp, a short compressed data block. The log runs to many entries. Most are identical or near identical in size, regular, suggesting routine transmissions. But near the end of the log, 3 entries are different. Larger, different structure, anomalous. 3 non-routine transmissions. The last one has a timestamp I interpret as the most recent, close to the crash. The rightmost display shows something that takes me longer to parse. It's a structural diagram of something. Biological, maybe. The shapes suggest organic tissue, rather than mechanical systems. And overlaid on the diagram a pattern, wave-like, periodic, the kind of pattern you see in an EEG output. Brain activity. Becca is looking at this one. "This is neurological mapping," she says. Her voice is flat and careful. They knew what it does. They mapped it in advance. "Mapped what?" Derek says from the passage. He's squeezed through and is standing just inside the aft space. "The effect of the transmission," Becca says. "On a brain. They knew it would." She stops. She touches the display with her fingertips. The transmission wasn't an accident. The silence in the aft section has a particular quality. The sky visible through the hull breach is very blue and very far away. Okay, I say. My voice comes out steady, which surprises me. Okay, so that's what we're working with. I look at the transmission log on the middle display. If there are 3 non-routine transmissions near the end, and the ship was heading specifically to the tracking station, if whoever sent this ship had a reason to crash it here, a reason to stop it, Becca says. She's still looking at the neurological map. Stop it. The non-routine transmissions. What if those aren't the attack signal? What if those are? She stops. Thinks. The ship was heading to the tracking station, a communications facility with active broadcast capability. She looks at me. What if the ship wasn't delivering the attack signal? What if it was delivering the countermeasure? I stare at her. The attack signal went out September 3rd, she says. The ship arrived September 7th. 4 days later. That gap, the ship was in transit, responding to the signal, carrying something that could undo it. She looks at the hull breach, at the ceiling torn open from inside. And it crashed. The internal pressure event, I say. The breach was from inside. Something detonated inside the ship. We both look at the debris on the floor, the 11 dense ovoid containers I collected. 12 centimeters long, sealed, no visible controls. These were in this section, I say slowly, scattered across the floor after the hull breach. Becca picks one up. Not containers, she says, with a new quality in her voice. Look at the surface texture. It's porous. I look. She's right, not smooth, not sealed. The surface is covered in micro-perforations, too small to see individually but visible as a uniform texture like fine sandstone. Aerosol dispersal, Becca says. I think about the atmospheric compound she detected in the ship. The modified organic compound that the original signated. Except the compound inside the ship is different from what's outside, I say. You said you detected trace concentrations of it in the ship. But what if it's not the attack compound? What if it's the countermeasure compound? Different chemical structure, but similar test profile? I tested for one compound, Becca says. I assumed it was the agent. If it's something else with a similar atmospheric signature, can you test it specifically? The 2 compounds. Can you tell them apart with what you have? She thinks. The soil moisture test strips respond to hydroxyl concentration. The attack compound and a neutralizing compound would have different hydroxyl profiles. She already has the testing kit in her hands. She opens one of the ovoid canisters. Or trees to. There's no obvious opening mechanism. Give it to me, I say. I turn the canister in my hands. Ovoid, porous surface, uniform weight. I press it, rotate it, look for a seam. There isn't one in the conventional sense, but there's a slight difference in texture at one end. A small region of smoother surface, about a centimeter across, at the narrower tip. I press it with my thumb. It clicks. The click is small, almost inaudible, but the texture of the object changes slightly under my fingers. The porous surface opens fractionally. Not dramatic, just a barely perceptible loosening, like the structure decompressing. And the smell in the aft section changes. Subtle, the ozone in something gets a slightly different quality. Warmer, if a smell can be warm. Less sharp. Becca has the test strip ready. She holds it near the canister. 20 seconds. The strip shows a hydroxyl reading. She looks at it for a long time. Then she looks at me. Different, she says. Different how? Higher hydroxyl density, opposite profile from what I found in the external samples. She pauses. Ryan, this could be. She stops again. She has a careful mind and she doesn't want to overpromise. This could be a neutralizing agent. If the attack compound works by modifying synaptic architecture through a specific chemical pathway, a compound with this profile could theoretically block or reverse that pathway. Theoretically. I'm a first-year grad student in agricultural science. Yes, theoretically. I look at the 11 canisters in my bag. How far does one of these dispersal canisters carry? In open air, it's assuming aerosolized particulate distribution. She does math in her head. A few 100 meters radius, maybe, depending on wind, and there are 11 canisters. 1,100 meters radius if we deploy them optimally. That's not nothing, but it's not a town. It's not a town, I agree, but maybe it's something. I look at the ship, the displays still glowing, the transmission log still showing those 3 final anomalous entries near the crash timestamp. The ship was carrying a payload. The crew, or the automated systems, were trying to get this payload to a broadcast facility. To the tracking station. Becca gets there before I finish the sentence. Her eyes change. The tracking station has broadcast capability. Array range at full power is continental, maybe more. Is it still operational? I think about the arrays I was working on the morning this started. Array 7, junction box, routine maintenance. The station itself, the operations building, the arrays, the power systems. I have no idea what state they're in, but the arrays were operational when I left. The operations building may be compromised by infected, but the hardware, the antenna systems, the broadcast infrastructure, that doesn't break from a zombie outbreak. That breaks from specific damage. I'd need to get there and assess, I say. That's the mission, Becca says. It's not a question. We both know it's the mission. We spend the next 20 minutes getting everything out of the aft section that's portable. I take the display's data where I can. I photograph every screen extensively. I sketch the transmission log entries in my notebook. I document the biological mapping display in as much detail as I can. I cannot extract the data directly. I have no interface for it. But photographs are something. We go back up to the crater rim. The sun is past midpoint. It's early afternoon. We have until dark. Route 9 or the tracking station, Derek asks. Not either or. He means priority. Route 9 group is already at the depot, I say. We consolidated them yesterday. He looks surprised. I thought we were going back for them. We did. Yesterday afternoon. I look at him. Now the priority is the tracking station. Derek holds the crowbar with both hands. He's been quiet through most of this. He processes things slowly and completely. I've come to understand. What's at the tracking station? A way to transmit the countermeasure to a much larger area. And how many infected are between here and there? I don't know exactly. I saw a group of 20 to 25 on the service road 4 days ago. Since then, I've seen isolated individuals. The main concentration seemed to be moving toward the station, which I stop. Which makes sense, I realize. The station was broadcasting signals, or its emergency systems were, before the power cut out. Sound and light attract the infected. They move towards stimulus. The stations might be surrounded, I say. Derek nods slowly. How many people do we need? I think about it. To clear a path and secure the broadcast array? At minimum 4. But we'd need to be quiet. Engagement with the infected is noise, and noise draws more. We want to avoid engagement wherever possible. I pause, and I need to be on the arrays. I can't be in a fight and fixing antenna equipment at the same time. 3 on clear path duty, 1 on technical, Derek says. Yes. He looks at Robbie. Robbie has been sitting on the crater rim listening to all of this, and he has that expression teenagers get when they've made up their mind about something and know the adults will try to talk them out of it. Derek looks at him and then looks away. I'll go, Derek says. I'll go, Robbie says immediately. Robbie, I say, you're 16. Walt sent me to get useful things done, Robbie says. This is the most useful thing there is. I look at him. He's right. Functionally, tactically, he's right. And arguing with correct reasoning because of someone's age is something I don't have the luxury of right now. Okay, I say. 4 of us. Me, Derek, Robbie, and Becca. Becca, who has been quiet, says, obviously I'm going. We drive back to the depot to explain the plan to Walt and get the others' input on what we're about to try. The depot receives this information in different ways. Walt sits very still with his hands on his knees while I explain the tracking station, situation, the countermeasure canisters, the broadcast plan. He doesn't interrupt. When I finish, he says, "How confident are you the countermeasure works?" "Garrett is still himself 4 days after a bite," I say. "That's something, and the test strip shows the opposite compound profile from the attack agent." "That's not a clinical trial," Walt says. "No, it's not." I pause. "But it's what we have. And if the broadcast from the tracking station can reach, I don't know, hundreds of miles, even if it only works on some percentage of the infected, even if it only works on recent cases, even if it only helps people like Garrett," Becca adds, "people who are fighting the conversion." Walt is quiet for a long time. Then, "Come back by dark. If you're not back by dark, I'm not sending anyone after you." "Understood." Tim Hartley, the mechanic from the auto parts store, pulls me aside before we leave. "I want to come. We have enough. You have one person with any combat training? No offense to Derek." He looks at his hands. "I did 3 years in the reserves, nothing fancy. But I'm not going to freeze up. I think about 4 people at an active broadcast array with potentially dozens of infected between us and the hardware." "Tim comes," I say. 5 of us in my truck, heading west on Old Mill Road toward the county road, toward the service road, toward the tracking station. The ovoid canisters in my tool bag. Derek's crowbar, the fire axe, a 3-foot length of iron pipe from the depot's supply shed. Tim's something. He finds, in the depot's utility cabinet, a bolt gun, the kind used for livestock processing. And he carries it with an expression that says, he's done this calculation before, and he doesn't like it, and he's doing it anyway. The drive west takes 40 minutes on roads I know. At the junction of the service road and the county road, I slow down and stop, and we all look west. The service road runs straight and flat for about 2 miles before the land starts rising toward the station. I can see movement at the far end of the straight stretch. Small, distant, but definitely movement. Probably 20 to 30 figures at the station end of the road. "They're at the station," Tim says. "Some of them. Probably the majority have drifted in over 4 days, drawn by whatever signals were broadcasting before power cut. I think, if the station's backup power has been keeping any systems running, emergency lighting, automated satellite link signals, anything, it would keep drawing them in. So we have to fight our way through 20 infected at minimum," Derek says. "Or we go around," Robbie says. We look at him. He's looking at the terrain map on Becca's tablet. There's an old access track that runs north of the service road about a half mile. Maintenance track for the array perimeter fence. It comes to the station from the northwest, past the back of the generator building. He shows us on the tablet. If they're concentrated on the south and east sides, drawn by whatever signals are coming from the main building. The northwest approach might be clear, Becca says. "It might be," Robbie says, "or it might not." "Try the northwest approach first," I say. "If it's compromised, we reassess." I look at the group. We go silent from the moment we leave the truck. No talking, hand signals only. Derek at front, Tim at back. I'm in the middle with the canisters and the tools. Becca behind Derek, Robbie behind me. We park the truck off the road a quarter mile east of the access track junction and walk the rest. The access track is unpaved and narrow. 2 tire ruts through flat scrub, barely distinguishable from the surrounding desert floor. We walk it in single file, slow and careful, stepping heel to toe on the packed earth to minimize footfall sound. The northwest approach. It's late afternoon. The sun is west and low, and directly in the faces of anything on the station's west side, which means their detection distance is shorter in that direction. We approach from slightly north of west, and the sun is at our backs. The station comes into view over a low rise, white buildings, the array structures, 2 water towers, and the infected. I count them as I come over the rise, moving my lips silently. 14 visible on the south side of the operations building, 6 near the generator shed to the east. 2 more circling the base of the antenna array I was working on when all of this started. The northwest corner is clear. We come in along the perimeter fence at a crouch, staying below the line. The fence is chain link, 6 feet high, and runs around the whole station complex. The northwest gate, a service entry used for equipment delivery, is padlocked from the outside, which means no infected got in this way. I have a key. 3 years on site, I have every key. The gate opens without sound. I hold it and the others file through. I lock it behind us. We're inside the station perimeter. The layout. Main operations building to the southeast. Generator shed east. Water towers north center. Array 7, the one I was on when the outbreak started, north-northwest. The 7 other arrays arranged in an arc from north to east. The infected are at the south and east sides, near the ops building and the generator shed. The broadcast array I need is Array 4, the long-range broadcast array, the one that handles the deep space comms when those contracts come in, and the one that, with full transmitter power, has the range I need. It's on the northeast arc, which puts it at the edge of the area where infected are circulating. We move in single file, slow, staying behind buildings where possible. Tim at the back, watching. Robbie by me, watching the opposite angle. Derek at point. We're passing between the operations building Array 7 when Robbie stops. Hand signal, freeze. He points west. One of them, 20 meters away, standing behind the water tower, facing away from us. Not moving, just standing. We wait. 30 seconds, a minute. It doesn't move, doesn't react, just stands there. We move. Array 4 is a 60-meter dish mounted on a motorized alt-azimuth platform, the big one, the one that looks like a proper radio telescope from the road. The control cabin at its base is a small concrete block building, about 3 meters, square, with a power connection to the main grid and a backup connection to the generator shed. The control cabin is locked. I have the key. I go in. The interior is exactly what I left 4 days ago. Slightly organized chaos of someone else's previous shift, coffee mug with a 2-inch dried residue, technical manual open to the wrong page, a workbench covered in cables and diagnostic equipment. The control panel is dark, main power is out. I check the backup connection status. The generator is running. The generator has been running this whole time on its reserve tank, which I know holds 4 days of fuel roughly. I look at the fuel indicator gauge on the backup panel. 18% remaining. Hours, not days. Maybe 12 hours of generator fuel left. I sit at the control panel and bring up the backup system. The display comes alive. Limited functionality, battery backup display, and I work through the system status. Main transmitter, offline, requires main power. Backup transmitter, online, functional, 20% rated power capacity. Position control, online. Signal routing, online, 20% rated power. For a deep space array, 20% rated power is still enormous in absolute terms. Continental range? Yes. Well into that range. I look at the canisters in my bag. The dispersal mechanism, the porous surface, the click release, is passive. The canister aerosols when triggered. It doesn't need a signal, doesn't need a carrier wave. But dispersal radius is limited to hundreds of meters per canister. What I need to broadcast isn't the compound itself. You can't broadcast chemistry. What I need to broadcast is something that replicates the effect of the compound electronically. A signal that has the same neutralizing effect on the neurological architecture that the compound has chemically. Which means I need to understand the compound's neurological profile well enough to translate it into a signal, which means I need the ship's biological mapping display. I have photographs. I spend the next 40 minutes in the control cabin running through the photos I took of the rightmost display, the neurological map with the overlaid wave pattern. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a signals engineer. But a wave is a wave, and I know how to read frequency and amplitude and phase relationships. The wave pattern overlaid on the biological map has specific characteristics. I write them down: frequency components, amplitude envelope, phase. It's a complex signal, not a single frequency, a modulated combination. The kind of signal a brain might produce or respond to, translated into parameters I can set on a transmitter. I think about this very carefully. Broadcasting a signal into a large area that's designed to affect brain activity I think about this for a long time. I think about Garrett. I think about the growing chaotic cluster in the ship's display. I think about the compound aerosol, which was already intended for wide dispersal from the ship, already intended to do exactly this on a large scale. The canister mechanism is just the chemical version of what I'm building now. I build the signal profile. It takes 90 minutes, working from the photographs, translating wave parameters into transmitter settings. I've done this kind of work before, not for this purpose, but the technical process is the same. You start with a target signal characteristic, and you work backward to the source parameters that produce it. While I work, Becca comes into the cabin. She looks at what I'm doing. She doesn't speak for several minutes. Then, is that the wave profile from the display? Yes, you're going to transmit it. I'm going to try. She looks at my workbench notes. She goes quiet again. Then, the hydroxyl test showed the compound has an anti-inflammatory profile along with the neutralizing properties. High-frequency components in the 5 to 8 kHz range would have analogous anti-excitatory effects on neural tissue. It would specifically affect the overexcited state that seems to characterize the infected. She pauses. I'm guessing. So am I say. Then let's both keep guessing. Outside, Tim signals from the array platform above. 2 infected have drifted toward Array 4 from the generator shed. Derek is watching them. So far, unalerted. I work faster. The signal profile is rough but complete. I load it into the transmitter's signal generator. I set the power to 18% of rated. I want to leave a margin in case I need to run longer than planned. I set the Array 4 dish position to the highest elevation, broadcasting up and out, maximizing the atmospheric scatter that will spread the signal over the widest geographic area. I also deploy the canisters. I take all 11 of them outside the cabin, trigger each one with the thumb press click, and place them in a ring around the array base, upwind of the infected concentrations on the south and east side. Close-range chemical delivery to complement the long-range signal broadcast. The smell in the air around the array base changes. That warm quality I noticed in the aft section. Spreading. I go back into the cabin. Becca is at the transmitter panel. Ready? Ready, I say. I key the transmitter. Array 4's dish hums. Not loudly. The alt-azimuth drive makes most of the noise, repositioning for the broadcast elevation. But there's the deep resonant quality to it, a frequency in the hardware that I've heard 100 times, and that I now hope is doing something completely different from what it's ever done before. The signal goes out. What happens next is not dramatic. Nothing immediately visible changes. The infected on the south side of the ops building continue doing what they do, circling, drifting. The one near the water tower that Robbie spotted earlier is still in place. We wait. Tim comes into the cabin after 5 minutes. He doesn't say anything. He leans against the wall and watches the infected through the window. 7 minutes. 8. The one near the water tower. I watch it carefully. It stops its slow drift. Stands still. This means nothing by itself. It was already standing still much of the time. But then it tilts its head. Not the head-tracking stimulus thing, not the predatory pivot, something else. slower, like something is happening to its attention from the inside out. Tim, I say quietly. He looks where I'm pointing. The infected near the water tower tilts its head once more. Then, slowly, very slowly, it sits down. On the desert ground, awkward, graceless, but it sits down. We watch it. 9 minutes. 10. The group on the south side of the ops building has slowed. Not stopped, but the quality of the movement has changed. Less driven. More, I don't have a word for it. Like the urgency has gone out of it. Like someone turned down a dial somewhere. It's doing something, Robbie says from the doorway. It's doing something. At 14 minutes, one of the infected on the south side stops walking entirely. Stands. And then slowly, in the way of someone who has gone too long without sleep, folds to its knees and stays there. Becca, I say. She's already watching. Partial response. Same as what we're seeing with Garrett. Individual variation in susceptibility. Some are responding more strongly than others. But, she pauses, but some are responding. Some are responding. Not all, not a cure, not a reversal of 4 days of mass infection across multiple states, but some. The ones who were most recently affected, maybe. The ones who still have enough neural architecture intact to respond to a counter signal. I look at the transmission power gauge. 16% fuel remaining. I crank the power setting up to 22% of rated. More range, more signal. We hold the broadcast for 3 hours. During that time, the infected at the station perimeter, original count approximately 32, show the following results. 11 have stopped active motion and are in a sitting or kneeling position, unresponsive to sound. I test this once carefully, with a hand clap at 50 meters. No reaction from the sitting ones. 8 have slowed significantly but remain ambulatory. 13 show no apparent change. 11 out of 32. About a third. I write this in my notebook. I write, partial neutralization, roughly 35% efficacy in direct broadcast proximity. Estimated broadcast range from array 4 at 22% power. Somewhere between 300 and 800 miles, depending on atmospheric conditions. 800 miles, even at 35% efficacy. Even in the best case, the fuel gauge hits 5%. I keep going until 2%, then shut down the transmitter. The dish goes quiet. The generator sputters on its last fuel, and then cuts out 7 minutes later, and the station goes fully dark. We stand in the sudden absolute quiet of the desert evening. The sky is orange and purple to the west. The air smells different, the canister compound spreading thin in the cooling air. Behind us, the access track north to where the truck is parked. South and east, the station complex with its changed population of the infected. Some sitting, some still drifting. Is there more fuel somewhere? Tim asks. The generator takes diesel, I say. We'd need to come back with fuel. We come back with fuel, Derek says. We come back with fuel. I agree. We leave the station the same way we came in, through the northwest gate, along the access track. The truck is where we left it. Nothing is found. The drive back to the depot is 28 miles and takes 35 minutes, and nobody says much. Robbie falls asleep against the door before we hit the county road. Derek watches the road behind us in the mirror. Tim holds the bolt gun with the safety on and looks at his hands. Becca writes in her own notebook. Small, neat handwriting that I see is actually a sequential log. Dated, formatted almost like a research record. She's been keeping it since the beginning. The ones that responded, she says, without looking up from the notebook. 35%. That's not enough. No, I say, but it's not nothing either. No, I say, if we can get more fuel, run the broadcast longer, wider, and if Garrett's blood sample shows what I think it shows. She pauses. There are research facilities, even now, somewhere. Military medical, CDC backup installations. If we can get data to them. The tracking station has satellite uplink capability, I say. If we come back with fuel and go through the ops building. If the computers are still intact, we might be able to push data to active satellites, anything that's still in orbit and receiving. She looks at me. How much data could you transmit? Depends on what's still in orbit and still listening. But if the Defense Department satellites are still operational, I pause. DISCs, WGS, the military comms constellations. Those are designed to survive almost anything. Someone in a hardened facility somewhere is probably still monitoring those frequencies. The biological mapping display, she says, the neurological profile, the transmission log, all of it. I can package the photographs, the signal parameters I built, the test strip results, Garrett's exposure timeline and current status. We come back tomorrow, Becca says. We come back tomorrow, I agree. When we reach the depot, the gate opens before we even stop. Walt is there. He looks at each of us in the truck, 5 of us, all present, no new injuries, and something in his shoulders drops about 2 centimeters. Garrett's asking about you, he says to me, once we're inside. I find Garrett in the separate room they've given him. He's sitting on a cot with a lantern, reading an old farm supply catalog, which is the only reading material available in the depot. The bruising from the bite wound has spread up his forearm to the elbow, but the wound itself, which I look at when he holds it out, looks like it's trying to heal. Not succeeding completely, but trying. The edges aren't clean, but they're not getting worse. What did you do out there, he asks. Broadcast something that might help people like you, I say. People in the early stages. People who still have something to fight back with. He thinks about that for a moment. My arm still hurts. I know, but I'm still me. You are. He looks at the catalog. My daughter is in Portland. My actual daughter, not Ellen's kids. He pauses. She would have been at work when this started. She works in a hospital. I don't say anything. Hospitals would have the infected coming to them, he says, from the start. Yes. But hospitals also have people who know how to fight infection, he says. And supplies. And structure. He pauses. She's smart. Smarter than me. Then she probably figured something out, I say. He nods. Not a satisfied nod. Just a nod that says, I need to believe that, and I'm going to. I leave him and go find a corner of the warehouse floor with a camp mat and lie down and look at the ceiling and try to list what happens tomorrow. Back to the spacecraft for one final survey of the aft section. Photograph everything remaining. Try to find if there's any physical data storage, any component I can take with me that holds the transmission logs directly. Tomorrow, fuel run for the generator. The closest diesel source I know of is a farm equipment dealer about 6 miles south of Creston. Large underground tanks, commercials dispensing pumps, probably still accessible. Tomorrow, back to the tracking station. Longer broadcast window. Satellite uplink attempt. 3 tasks. 1 a day. With an unknown number of infected between each point on the list. I also need to figure out the spacecraft's power source. The bypass I rigged might hold, might not. If it fails, we lose the displays again. I want to find the source itself. Whatever's powering those systems 4 days after a desert crash. That power source might be portable. That power source might be something I can use in other ways. I add it to the list. I also add, because I keep thinking about it, and I won't stop until I write it down, who sent that chip, who built it, what the 3 non-routine transmissions near the crash were, whether the crash was caused by the same entity that launched the initial attack, trying to prevent the countermeasure from reaching the broadcast facility. I write the word sabotage and circle it, and then lie there thinking about it. If someone, or something, deliberately destroyed the ship's internal systems to prevent the countermeasure from being delivered, then there's a party to this situation that we haven't accounted for yet. A party that wanted the infection to proceed, that moved to prevent the cure, and that may have capabilities beyond crashing a spacecraft in a desert. I think about this until I stop thinking and fall asleep. The morning brings two things I didn't expect. First, Garrett woke up with more mobility in the bitten arm than he had yesterday. Not healed, still bruised, still damaged, but more mobile. The signal broadcast worked on him too, apparently, at range. He's 17 miles from the tracking station. Second, the hand crank radio, which Tim checks every morning on his watch rotation, picks up a new signal at 6:40 a.m., not 1580 a.m., not any civilian frequency. A structured burst signal on tune 182 kHz, International Maritime Distress Frequency. And the burst is not voice, it's data, a quick compressed packet, and Tim recognizes it because he worked military signals in the reserves. That's a military MCON burst, Tim says when he brings me the radio. Emergency communications. It's automated. Someone set up an automated beacon on a military frequency, and it's still running. Where is it coming from? I ask. Triangulation with one radio is impossible, he says. But the signal strength suggests within 100 miles. I look at the radio. I look at the notebook with my transmission data. I look at Garrett's arm. Can we respond to it? I ask. Not on this radio. It's not equipped for that frequency. The tracking station's equipment can transmit on 21A2, I say. Tim nods slowly. I look at my notebook. The second task for today was always going back to the tracking station. Now it has an additional item. Respond to the military beacon. Tell someone with actual resources what we found, where we are, what the broadcast is doing. Actually change something beyond a 35% reduction in 32 infected in a desert. I close the notebook. Let's go, I say. The day moves in a way that days have started to move, not in hours but in decisions, each one producing the conditions for the next. We get fuel from the farm equipment dealer south of Creston. 400 liters of diesel in the depot's utility trailer, towed by Walt's truck, Derek driving, Tim and I in my truck running ahead to check the road. The dealer's lot has 8 infected when we arrive. We avoid the main buildings, go around to the bulk storage tank in the east yard, which is accessible from a separate gate. Infected can hear the pump running. We hear them responding on the other side of the building. Sounds getting louder, moving toward the noise. We load fast and leave before they round the corner. Back at the depot to hook up, then west toward the station. Robbie stays back this time. Walt asks, and this time I don't argue, because the teenager who spent yesterday at the tracking station with us deserves a rest day, and Walt deserves one thing he asked for. The northwest approach is as we left it. No new infected in the access track corridor. One of the 11 that sat down yesterday is still sitting in the same spot, unresponsive, but alive. I see it breathing as we pass. The others that sat down have mostly died there in the desert heat. Dehydration, I think. Or the underlying neurological condition, whatever the compound and the infection were doing to their systems. Finally completing its work, once the over-excitation was removed. I don't let myself feel much about that. There isn't a version of this that has clean edges. We refuel the generator. It takes 40 minutes to transfer fuel from the trailer to the generator tank by hand pump. And for those 40 minutes, Derek and Tim watch the perimeter while I start working on the satellite uplink. The operations building, I go in through the north entrance, which has a personnel door requiring my key card. Inside, dark, ventilation off, the smell of a building that's been closed for days, in the desert heat. Phil's desk at the reception is empty, the door behind it open. I go to the main operations floor. 2 infected. I hear them before I see them. That sound in the enclosed space, in the dark. I stand completely still and listen for location. One is in the equipment bay to my left. One is somewhere further back, near the array control room. I don't go left. I go right, to the satellite uplink station along the east wall, the console I know from having used it for routine status uploads. The console powers up when the generator fuel hits the system. Not instantly. There's a 5-minute boot sequence. Backup systems coming online in order. I sit in front of it, and I wait. And behind me in the dark, I can hear the infected in the equipment bay doing its slow circuit. The uplink system comes online. I have the photographs on my phone, which I connect to the console via the charging cable I took from the gas station convenience store 3 days ago. I build the data package, photographs of all 3 displays, my written signal parameters, the biological profile translation, Becca's atmospheric test strip results and compound profile analysis, Garrett's case data, our broadcast results and efficacy estimate. I add a text document. I type it fast. To whoever receives this, I am Ryan Calloway, satellite communications technician, stationed at the Nevada tracking facility. I am transmitting from the facility on an emergency basis. On September 7th, a spacecraft of unknown origin crashed 22 miles northwest of this facility. The spacecraft was carrying a countermeasure compound and signal profile designed to neutralize a mass neurological infection delivered by an anomalous VHF broadcast on September 3rd. We have broadcast the countermeasure signal from this facility using the long-range array. Estimated efficacy 35% in direct range, unknown beyond. The attached data package contains the biological mapping display of the countermeasure neurological profile, the transmission parameters we used, atmospheric compound analysis, and a partial immunity case study. The spacecraft crash may have been deliberate sabotage to prevent countermeasure delivery. I do not know the origin of the initial attack signal. If you can receive this, please respond on 2182 kHz. We have survivors at the agricultural depot north of Creston. We need medical resources and information. We will monitor 2182 daily at 0600 and 1800. I hit transmit. The uplink runs through whatever satellites are still in range and active. I watch the console for a confirmation handshake. 3 minutes. 4. Then, uplink confirmed, 1 packet destination log to WGS-4 transponder active. WGS-4 is a military communications satellite. Someone has that satellite's transponder active. Someone with the authority to keep a military satellite running is still out there. I go back outside. The infected in the equipment bay found the north door I came in through and is pressing against it from inside. I hear it, but don't see it. It doesn't know how to open a door. I leave it there. Becca is waiting by the array. She has the transmitter running. She loaded the signal parameters herself from my notes while I was doing the uplink. Array 4 is pointed at broadcast elevation. The hum is familiar now. Uplink sent? She asks. Confirmed on WGS-4. She doesn't react with excitement. Just nods and turns back to the transmitter status. This is what I like about her. We broadcast for 4 hours. Fuel drops. But we planned for this. We brought enough to run the generator for 12 hours today and have enough reserved for another run tomorrow, if needed. During the 4-hour window, I watch the response in the station perimeter. New infected have drifted in overnight, probably 12 new, and of these, 3 show significant response within 30 minutes of broadcast start. 3 out of 12, consistent with the 35% figure from yesterday. 35%. I keep coming back to that number. What it means is that 65% of infected individuals in broadcast range are either too far gone neurologically or individually immune to the counter signal. For the infected who have been in the converted state for days, whose brain architecture has been fundamentally altered, the signal may not be doing anything recoverable at that point. But for recent cases, for people in the early hours, for people like Garrett who are fighting it, I think about the data package on WGS-4 passing through a military satellite to wherever the active monitoring station is. I think about what a military research team with actual laboratory equipment could do with Becca's compound analysis, Garrett's blood sample, the biological mapping profile. They could do considerably more than 35%. The broadcast is still running when my radio, the two-way, the station frequency, not the hand crank, picks up a signal, not a voice, a tone pattern. Short, long, short, short, long. A coded pattern, regular, deliberate, not Morse code. Something simpler, binary, pairs of tones repeating. Tim looks at it. He goes very still. That's a response to the uplink, he says. How can you tell? Because that pattern. Too short means acknowledged, one long means authenticated, too short means transmission received. He looks at me. Military signal protocol. Short-form authentication response. Someone got the package and this is them confirming. Where are they transmitting from? He listens. Not far. The signal strength is. He pauses. Ryan, this is close. This is within 50 miles. 50 miles. I stand the desert outside Array 4's control cabin with the hum of the broadcast running behind me and the late afternoon light coming through the scrub at a low angle, and I think about a military installation within 50 miles that is still operational, that has its monitoring systems running, that just authenticated receipt of my uplink data. Fort Irwin, the National Training Center, approximately 40 miles north. I've been past it on drives, seen the fence lines and the range markers. A major military installation with hardened infrastructure, vehicle storage, fuel reserves, medical facilities, communications equipment. Tim, I say. Yeah, he says. We need to contact Fort Irwin. With what? I look at the operations building. Inside, among the array control equipment, there is a SATCOM terminal. Military grade, encrypted, installed as part of the government contract that funds half of this facility's operating budget. I have the facility key. I have access to every room and system in that building, including the SATCOM terminal, including its 2,182 kilohertz transceiver. I go back into the building. The infected at the north door has moved. I hear it somewhere in the equipment bay, still circling. I go south along the main corridor to the SATCOM room, key it open, power it on from the generator feed. The terminal comes up. It's operational. The frequency is there. I set it to 2,182 kilohertz. I key the mic. This is Ryan Calloway at Nevada Tracking Station. I transmitted a data package via WGS4 approximately 4 hours ago. I received your authentication response. I am now transmitting directly. Please respond. Static. 10 seconds. Then a voice. Flat, professional, controlled in the specific way of someone who has been maintaining professionalism through something that requires enormous effort to maintain it through. This is Fort Irwin Communications. Ryan Calloway, we received your package. We've been looking at it for the last 3 hours. We need to talk. I close my eyes. Yes, I say, we do. What follows is a 90-minute conversation that I won't reproduce completely here. Some of it is technical, working through the signal parameters and Becca's compound analysis with a medical officer on their end who has a background in neurology, and some of it is logistical, establishing our location and the depot's location and what resources we have. But the core of it, the thing that matters, is this. Fort Irwin has been running the WGS4 transponder since day 2 of the outbreak. They've been receiving data from active SATCOM terminals, military and civilian, across the western United States. They have a functioning medical unit. They have a data analysis team that has been trying to understand the infection from the biochemical side for 5 days. And they have been failing because they didn't have the biological profile from the spacecraft, which they didn't know existed until 3 hours ago. The medical officer on the other end of the radio sounds when I tell him about the spacecraft and the display and the neurological mapping, like someone who has just been handed a piece of a puzzle they've been staring at incomplete for days. The wave profile you broadcast today, he says, we're going to need the raw parameters so we can replicate it on our equipment. We have a 50 kilowatt broadcast capability here. If your array got 35% efficacy at 22% of rated power, our 50 kilowatts on top of your broadcast would significantly improve coverage area and probably efficacy. I can transmit the parameters now, I say. Do that. A pause. The compound. The aerosol compound in the canisters. How many canisters did you say there were? 11. I deployed all of them at the tracking station today. The empty canisters, are they recoverable? Probably. I can go back for them. The residue chemistry inside, even empty, there's residue. Our lab can work with that. A pause. The spacecraft. We need people at the spacecraft. It's partially accessible, I say. Some sections are still blocked. We'll bring equipment to clear it. Another pause. Ryan, you should understand how significant what you've done today is. The broadcast this afternoon, we've had field teams monitoring population centers in 3 counties. They're reporting behavioral changes in recently converted individuals beginning approximately 2 hours ago. A measurable percentage. Not reversal, not a cure, but changes consistent with what you described. I don't say anything for a moment. Where are your survivors? He asks. I give him the depot location. We can have a convoy there tomorrow morning. Medical team, engineering team, communications equipment. We want the spacecraft secured and the tracking station running continuously. And we want He pauses. Ryan, you said you had an immunity case study. The bitten individual who hasn't converted. Garrett, he's at the depot. We need to talk to him. We need blood and tissue samples. Because if there's a partial natural immunity, a mechanism we can identify, that changes the treatment calculus significantly. He'll cooperate, I say. Good. A pause. And the data package? The biological mapping from the spacecraft. You said the ship was heading to your facility. Deliberately. The trajectory map showed it. The ship was trying to deliver the countermeasure to your broadcast capability specifically, which means whoever built and sent that ship knew your facility existed, knew its broadcast range and specifications, and was trying to use it to counter the attack. A pause. That implies that the countermeasure came from the same source as the attack, I say, or a source that was responding to it. Or it implies there are 2 parties involved, an attacking party and a responding party. And the ship, the countermeasure, was the responding party's move. Which was sabotaged, I say. Which was sabotaged, he agrees. And that tells us the attacking party knows we're trying to stop them, and is actively working to prevent it. The operations building is quiet around me except for the distant sound of the infected in the equipment bay doing its slow circuit. Outside, the desert is cooling into evening. The generator hums. Array 4 is still broadcasting. Tomorrow morning, I say. Tomorrow morning, he confirms. I shut down the SATCOM terminal. I sit in the room for a minute. Then I go back outside. Becca is at the array cabin door. She reads my face. They're coming, she asks. Tomorrow morning, she nods. She looks at the broadcast display on the cabin panel, the signal running, the fuel gauge, the array position. I want to run the broadcast overnight, she says, as long as we have fuel. We have enough for 7 more hours at this power level, I say. 7 hours, she says. 7 hours of people in range, either converting or not converting, either reaching the point of no return or not. Yes, then let's run it 7 hours. We run it 7 hours. Tim and Derek take turns watching the perimeter, while Becca and I maintain the equipment, and I write up everything I can. Complete notes, the transmission parameters, the compound profile, Garrett's case history, all of it organized for the medical officer's team that's coming tomorrow. I write for hours. My handwriting gets worse as I get tired. I keep writing. Around 2 in the morning, Becca falls asleep in the chair beside the control panel, and I watch the transmitter status alone and think about the 2 parties, attacker and responder. and the sabotaged spacecraft and the fact that something out there moved to prevent the cure from being delivered. Moved once, might move again. I add to my notes security considerations for broadcast facility. The tracking station, once we have it running continuously, becomes a target. Not for the infected, they don't understand what it is, but for whatever knocked that ship out of the sky. I don't know what form that threat takes. I don't know its capabilities. I don't know if it's terrestrial or otherwise. All I know is that the spacecraft came to my facility for a reason and something stopped it from getting there. And we did it anyway. A signals engineer with a toolbox and a grad student in agricultural science and a mechanic and a farmhand and a farmer's son. We did it anyway. The broadcast runs until fuel hits the reserve threshold at 4:40 a.m. And the generator cuts to conservation mode, killing the non-essential systems. Array 4 goes quiet. The dish hums down to stillness. The desert is cold now, deep desert cold. The kind that feels impossible during the day when it's 105. I stand outside the control cabin with my jacket on and I watch the eastern sky. Light is coming. The convoy from Fort Irwin arrives at the depot at 7:50 a.m. 3 military vehicles, 2 trucks and a van. 12 personnel, including the medical officer I spoke to on the radio, whose name is Dr. Paul Hartwick, a lean 60-year-old with the worn, deliberate quality of someone who has been solving hard problems for 4 decades. He shakes my hand and looks at me with an assessment that takes about 2 seconds and apparently says enough. "Show me the ship," he says. We drive to the spacecraft. Standing at the crater rim with 12 military personnel and Becca and me looking down at the dark hull in the crater, Paul Hartwick is quiet for about 30 seconds. Then he looks at me. "Tell me everything you know about it, in order of what matters most." I tell him about the aft section first, the displays, the transmission log, the biological mapping, the power source. Then the forward section and the depth display in the main room. Then the canisters. Then the bypass I rigged and whether it might have failed overnight. We need to check that. He listens. He asks 3 questions, all technical, all the right questions. Then he says, "Team 2, get in there and photograph every surface. Team 3, I need the aft section fully cleared and all equipment logged. Team 1 stays with me." He looks at me. "You're Team 1. Show me the bypass." I show him the bypass. His engineer, a young sergeant named Whitfield, looks at the copper strap and zip tie arrangement and says, extremely professionally, "Huh. It worked," I say. "It absolutely worked," Whitfield says. "I just have some feelings about how." We spend 2 days at the spacecraft. The military team does what I couldn't do alone. Full inventory, full photographic documentation, extraction of every accessible data component from the aft section. The power source turns out to be a compact device about the size of a car battery in the deepest accessible part of the aft section. It reads, on Whitfield's instruments, as producing power through a mechanism none of them recognize, but that is consistent with sustained thermoelectric output. No fuel, no reactor, no moving parts. Just produces power. Whitfield wraps it carefully in a case and writes things in his notebook for a very long time. The blocked section of the aft, the deepest third of the ship, past where we cleared, is opened on the 2nd day. What's there? More displays, similar to the aft section, but more of them. A data storage component that the team identifies by its connection architecture as a primary log system. And something else, a seat, sized like the one in the main room, but this one has material attached to it, organic material. The crew did not eject before the crash. We don't discuss this much. I go back to the depot on the afternoon of the 2nd day. Garrett is sitting outside in the shade, his arm wrapped, working through the farm supply catalog again. "How are you feeling?" I ask. "Better," he says. Actually, better. The doc from the army says the bruising is regressing. Good. He looks at me. Is it going to work? The broadcast. We don't know yet, not for certain. I sit down in the shade next to him. But Fort Irwin is running their broadcast equipment now. They have 50 kilowatts. And there are 3 other military installations that receive the signal parameters from WGS-4 and are running the same transmission. I pause. That's 4 broadcast sources, different parts of the country, and the compound, the chemical version. Hartwick's team is synthesizing from the residue in the canisters. They think they can produce it in volume within a week. Garrett nods, looks at his arm. My daughter is in Portland. I know. Fort Irwin said they got a response from a military facility in Oregon. They're operational. I know, I say. They're going to transmit that information to the Oregon facility. He doesn't say anything for a minute. Then, you think she's okay. I think she works in a hospital and she's smart, I say. And hospitals are the most likely places to have people who understood what was happening early and had the resources to respond. He nods again. We sit in the shade for a while. The depot is more populated now. Fort Irwin personnel, our survivors, the newcomers. There's a hum of activity, voices, the sound of equipment being organized. It doesn't sound like the end of everything. It sounds like the beginning of something, which is a very different thing, and I'm still working out how I feel about that. On the 3rd day, I go back to the tracking station with Whitfield and set up the continuous broadcast. Array 4 runs on Fort Irwin's portable generator now, which has a 300-gallon tank on it and will run for weeks. The signal parameters are loaded, the dish positioned, the broadcast profile tuned. Whitfield improves the signal design with the modifications. Hartwick's medical team suggests, based on the biological profile study, small adjustments to the frequency components, amplitude modulation changes that improve the neural anti-excitation effect based on their lab testing. The efficacy estimate goes from 35% to somewhere in the high 40s. High 40s. That's almost half. Almost half of the infected who are still in a recoverable state. Still neurologically responsive. Show measurable response to the broadcast. Not a cure. The converted stay converted, most of them. The deep structural damage, the full conversion. We can't walk that back, not yet. Not with what we have now. But the recent cases. The people in the first 24 to 48 hours. The people like Garrett who are still fighting. For those people, the broadcast and the compound give them a chance. A chance is not nothing. I stay at the tracking station for the first week, running the broadcast and monitoring the array systems and maintaining the hardware with Whitfield, who turns out to be genuinely good company, in the way that technically minded people often are when they're working on something that matters. We don't talk about much beyond the work. The work is enough. In the 2nd week, I drive back to the spacecraft by myself one morning. The military team is still there. They'll be there for months, probably. But in the early hours, the crater is quiet, and I park and climb down alone. The main room looks different now. The military team has added lighting, cables, equipment. The bypass I rigged with a copper strap and zip ties has been replaced by a proper connection that Whitfield installed. The amber panel and the depth display are both running on clean, stable power. I sit in front of the depth display. The map structure is there. The chaotic peripheral cluster. It's not growing anymore. I sit there for a long time and look at it, and I can't tell if the cluster is actually smaller. I want it to be, but wanting doesn't make it so, and I've been looking at this display for 2 weeks now, with varying emotional states, and I can't trust my interpretation. I photograph it. I'll compare to yesterday's photographs later. What I can say, sitting in that circular room with the hum of the military generator coming faint through the hull, is that the cluster is not growing. For the first time since I've been watching it, the count of new chaotic nodes added at the periphery is 0. I write that in my notebook. 0 new nodes. Day 14. Then I sit there a while longer and I think about what brought me here. The corroded junction box on Array 7. A quarter tank of gas. The column of smoke in the desert. Climbing down a crater slope with a tool bag and a fire axe and a 2-week-old granola bar. I think about Jeff, who I watched go down on the first day, and who I haven't been back to look for because I know what I would find, and some knowledge is better deferred. I'll go back. I will, just not yet. I think about Garrett, who was driving Route 9 before sunrise on September 3rd, and got hit with something he couldn't know would either save him or prepare him to be saved, and who is now at the depot having his blood drawn every morning by Hartwick's medical team with the patience of someone who has decided to be useful with whatever he is left. I think about Becca, who is currently at Fort Irwin presenting her compound analysis to a team of actual chemists, and who emails me. The station got internet access through the fort's satellite uplink 2 days ago, with updates that are dense with technical terminology and that I have to read slowly and occasionally look things up. Yesterday's email ended. The synthesis is scaling. We could have aerosol production capacity of 2,000 canisters per week within 30 days. I also want to talk about the third non-routine transmission in the ship's log. I think I know what it was. I wrote back, "Tell me." She hasn't responded yet. I think about what the third non-routine transmission might be. The first two, the ones before the crash, I've been working on with the military data analysis team. The first appears to be a compressed data burst, probably the biological mapping profile, transmitted to something in orbit. The second has a different structure, what Hartwick thinks might be a beacon or navigation signal. The third, the last one, right before the crash, is different from both. Short, dense, addressed not to orbit but to something on the surface. Addressed, based on the directional antenna log I found in the aft section, to a position about 12 miles north of the crash site. 12 miles north of the crash site is a place I haven't been. Open desert, no structures I know of, no roads on any map I have. I've been meaning to drive out there. I haven't yet. Tomorrow, maybe. I close the notebook and stand up in the circular room and look around once. More at the alien interior, the curved walls, the recessed alcoves, the single seat that sits low and wide in the center of the space. I think about whoever sat in that seat and aimed this ship at a desert tracking station to try and deliver something that might stop the infection. About what they expected to find here and what they found instead. A crashed spacecraft. An empty facility. One signals tech who happened to still be on site fixing a corroded junction box. I pick up my tool bag. The fire axe hangs from the strap. Still there, still scraped along the handle from the service road fence post it cut years ago. I carry it out through the corridor, out the opening, up the crater slope, over the rim, back to my truck. The desert is wide and white and entirely itself, indifferent to everything that's happened in it. Everything still happening. A hawk turns slow circles a mile to the east. The same hawk, maybe, or a different one, it doesn't matter. Life just keeps doing its thing in whatever space is left. I drive north. The access road that goes nowhere useful turns into hardpan, and then into something like a path. Something that might be tires, or might be erosion, or might be something else. And I follow it north for 12 miles by odometer, the desert spreading flat in every direction, and when I reach 12 miles I stop and get out. There's nothing here. Open desert, scrub and rock and the flat shimmer of heat. No structure, no marker, nothing that explains why a ship in the last seconds before a crash sent a compressed data burst at this specific geographic location. I stand in the heat for a minute. Then I walk 50 meters west because the sun is in my eyes and I want to look from a different angle. And I step over a rock, and under the rock where the rock's shadow has kept the ground slightly cooler, there's something that isn't dirt. A panel, about 40 centimeters square. The same dark matte material as the spacecraft hull, flush with the ground surface, completely invisible if you're not stepping over a rock and looking down at a 45-degree angle in the right light. I kneel. I brush the dirt away. The panel is intact, undamaged, completely at odds with the surrounding desert floor. I press it with 2 fingers the way I've learned to press things made of this material. It opens, not outward, down. A hatch in the desert floor, going down into something. Dim light coming from below. The same amber quality as the forward panel in the spacecraft. A ladder. I sit there on my heels in the desert heat. And I look at the open hatch and the amber light coming from below and I think, of course there's something else. There is always something else. I check my radio. I have a signal. I call the tracking station. Whitfield, I say. Ryan, he says. I need you to come to my location. I'm 12 miles north of the spacecraft. Bring equipment. I pause. And bring Becca if she's back from Fort Irwin. Is everything okay? I look at the hatch and the amber light. Everything is fine, I say. I just found something. I don't climb down immediately. I wait for Whitfield. This is, I think, one of the more mature decisions I've made in the last 2 weeks, and it costs me something to make it. Every part of my engineer's brain wants to go down the ladder right now and find out what's in there. But I've learned something in the past 2 weeks about the difference between what you can do alone and what you should do alone, and this, whatever this is, goes in the second category. I sit on the rock in the shade and I wait. Whitfield arrives in 40 minutes. Behind his truck, Becca in a Fort Irwin vehicle. She got my message via the station radio relay and came directly from the highway. She gets out and walks to where I'm sitting and looks at the open hatch. The third transmission, she says. You said you figured out what it was. I thought it might be a beacon, she says. A location marker. Something transmitting a coordinate signal to someone on the ground. She looks down into the amber light. Something already here. Something already here, I say. The 3 of us look at the hatch for a moment. Whitfield has his hand on the sidearm he carries and then consciously takes it away. Equipment's in the truck, he says. Get the lights, I say, and the radio, and the atmospheric test kit. Becca already has the atmospheric kit. She holds it over the open hatch and takes a reading. She looks at the strip. She looks at me. Countermeasure compound, she says, clean and concentrated. Whatever's down there has been producing it. A source, not just 11 canisters. A source. I think about thousands of canisters per week synthesis at Fort Irwin. I think about 35% efficacy rising to 48 with signal tuning. I think about the growing chaotic cluster that stopped growing on day 14. I think about what a continuous, concentrated source of the countermeasure compound, 12 miles from the broadcast facility, could do if integrated into the station's atmospheric systems, if dispersed in combination with the array broadcast, if given to Hartwick's team to study directly rather than through residue analysis. I think about all of it. Then I put my hand on the ladder. I'll go first, I say. Becca says, obviously not. She's already on the ladder, I let her. She descends about 3 meters, stops, looks around, looks up at me. It's clear. Come down. I go down. The space below is small, 4 meters square, roughly, with a ceiling just high enough to stand upright. The walls are the spacecraft material. The floor is a hard, flat surface. Along 2 walls, equipment. The same display type as in the spacecraft, 4 of them. All active, all showing information I can't yet read. A single device in the center of the floor, about the size of a large suitcase, with the same porous surface as the canisters on a much larger scale, producing a steady, slow aerosol output that rises, hits the ceiling, and disperses into the air, the source. And on the far wall, something I stop and look at for a long time. It's a display, different from the others. Larger, and it's not showing data. It's showing an image. The image is of a planet. From above, from a distance, the curve of it visible, blue and white and brown. A planet, our planet, Earth. And on it, points of light, scattered. Not random. Organized, dense in some areas, sparse in others. I look at the density patterns and I recognize them. Population centers, major cities. The bright clusters are the places humans are concentrated. But some of the points are different. Some of them are a different color. Not the warm white of populated areas, but a cooler, dimmer light that I don't have a classification for yet. These cooler points are spread across the image, not concentrated in cities, not matching any geographic pattern I recognize. There are about 40 of them. I count twice. 41, actually, on careful recount. 41 locations on a global image of Earth, marked in a different color from the rest. Becca, I say. She's looking at the same image. What are the cool colored points? I ask. She doesn't answer immediately. She steps closer to the display and looks at it carefully, and I watch her face go through something. Not panic, not amazement. Something more specific than both of those. The expression of someone whose hypothesis has just been confirmed by evidence they weren't ready to see. Crash sites, she says. I look at the image again. 41 points, 41 spacecraft. Not all of them crashed the same way as ours. The distribution pattern suggests different timing, different locations, different approach vectors, but 41 separate delivery attempts. And at each one, presumably, the same thing, a countermeasure payload, aerosol canisters, a data package intended for a nearby broadcast facility, a trajectory aimed at something specific. 41 attempts to stop the same thing, and somewhere, in the signal diagram in the main spacecraft, in the attacking party's calculation, someone was watching all 41 of those attempts and trying to stop them. I stand in the underground chamber in the Mojave Desert, and I look at the image of my planet, covered in lights, and I think about what it means that 41 separate entities, or one entity 41 times, made the same choice we made, the choice to try to stop it. And that 41 times something moved to prevent them. And that we're still here. We ran the broadcast. We sent the data package. Fort Irwin has the compound in synthesis. The cluster stopped growing. We're still here. Ryan, Becca says. She's looking at a secondary display, the smaller one to the left of the image. This one is a communication channel. It's been active since. She looks at a timestamped indicator. Since the third non-routine transmission, since the ship sent the beacon signal down to this location. Active how? I ask. Active as in it's been waiting for a response. I look at her. The ship sent the beacon signal, she says, very carefully, to this location, which has a communication channel that's been waiting for a response. A response from what? From whom? From someone who was supposed to come down a ladder in the desert and activate the response terminal. From whoever was on the receiving end of a message that said, I couldn't deliver the payload directly. Here's where I've left it. Here's the data. Here's the channel. Someone or something was supposed to be here already, before the crash, before the outbreak. Instead, the only person who ended up here is a satellite communications technician who was fixing a corroded junction box on the morning that everything changed. Whitfield has come down the ladder. He's standing behind us, looking at the communication display. He doesn't say anything for a moment. Then, do I need to call Fort Irwin about this? Yes, I say. Do you need to respond to that channel first? I look at the waiting communication interface, the amber glow of it, the patient, static quality of a channel that's been open and waiting for 2 weeks. Yes, I say. I step up to it. I've been touching alien interfaces for 2 weeks, and I know the pressure points now, the gesture vocabulary, the material responses. I find the activation surface. I press it. The channel opens. I have no idea who or what is on the other end. I have no idea what language this channel uses, or what protocol governs it, or what I'm about to say will be received as anything meaningful. But I've been sending signals into unknown distances my whole career. You calibrate the best you can. You point the array at the right coordinates, and you transmit. I say, "This is Ryan Calloway. I received your message. The countermeasure is deployed. We're holding the broadcast. Tell me what comes next." Static. The amber light. The image of Earth behind me with its 41 cool-colored points. I wait. The channel stays open. Outside, above us, the desert holds its heat. Above the desert, Array 4 continues to broadcast. Above the broadcast, a military satellite in orbit receives and retransmits the data package to 3 other facilities. And those facilities run their own arrays. And the signal goes out and out and out across the continent. And whatever it reaches, that can still respond to it responds.